Welcome back, everyone. We are on item number 12 on page 141, and we'd like to welcome the airport. They'd like to come up with Steve. Thank you. I hope everyone had a lovely lunch today. So we've got David, Jonathan, Murray and Steve. Welcome to deliver the interim report and results. Thank you. Hand it over to you, Steve, first.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. As you know, we've got two reports. The first, the interim report for the 6 months, that's focused on the performance for that period and a bit of an outlook to the remainder of the year. And the airport reps are all here, as you said, to present that to us. They have a bit of a presentation that they'll use as part of that. So without further ado, I'll just introduce them to report to you.
A bit loud. Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. And
So can someone turn a phone off back there? Okay, we're just going to turn that phone off. Thank you.
so, as Mr. Patterson said, we've got our 6 monthly report, and I think I'm actually summarised the activity and progress for the 6 months very well. The only really disappointment that we had for that 6 month period is probably the amount of activity, the number of passengers travelling through our terminal. That's pretty much consistent with what's been happening in New Zealand, particularly regional airports. So that is something that has been probably the biggest disappointment. Clearly the redevelopment of the terminal has been and remains front and centre of our attention, and I know that we will cover that mostly under our SOI. The only other comment I have in regards to the 6 month result is that we're ahead of our SOI targets in virtually all areas, most of them anyway, including the financial results. With that, I'll pass over to the CEO and Chief Financial Officer.
Right-hand side.
Sorry. Thanks, Madam Chair. Murray. Okay, so in terms of key highlights of the first 6 months of the year, some critical airside pavement work was undertaken, primarily around our fire station and refuelling areas. We introduced licence plate recognition in August to our car parks and opened our long stay car park extension, which provided an additional 128 car parks. From a sustainability perspective, we maintained our level 4 ACA accreditation with an 80% reduction so far in our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and I'll talk a bit more about plans in that regard once we're into the SOI conversation. Very pleasing team engagement score of 83%. That's in terms of the overall score. We had 100% turnout in terms of survey completion, which is a first for us. In terms of our relationship with our key customer, Air New Zealand, we continue to work collaboratively with them, on the terminal development and the design. You'll appreciate that a lot of that building is for them, and so we've been working very closely with their teams on that. We've also continued to work with Air New Zealand around future aircraft operations into Palmerston North, with a focus on the opportunity to see A320s operating on Auckland Palmerston North route at peak time of the day. And finally, we did a lot of work around funding for the terminal and for other capital program, and we'll talk a bit more about that within the SOI itself. In terms of passenger numbers, that was, I guess, the downside of the 6 months. The graph there shows you last year versus this year by month. It's a little bit hard to see the months, but you can see there's quite a trend since, I think, July last year, whereby this year's performance is below last year's. Now, that's indicative of all regional ports in New Zealand. Air New Zealand have reduced capacity, and in many cases, demand has reduced due to airfares and just general economic conditions. So we achieved 272,000 passengers. Our target was 283,000, so 4% unfavourable. Income at 8.7 million was 3% unfavourable, and it was pretty much in line with that reduction in passenger numbers. Normalised expenditure, when we strip out the temporary terminal, was 4.3 million, which was around 7% favourable to the SOI. And in terms of 6-month net profit after tax, a result of 1.45 million. Really the result of some short-term gains and timing differences. And CapEx spend was 4.2 million. Okay. So in terms of the second half of the year, on the basis that the TDP price and program is approved on the 8th of May, we'll look to relocate to the temporary terminal shortly thereafter. And at that stage, the demolition of the western wing of the current terminal will commence. We're very close to agreeing commercial terms with a significant tenant for a warehouse within what we call Zone D on the McGregor Street extension part of the airport. We're hoping to see that happen before June. And we've continued to work on identification of land that's non-strategic and which could be potentially sold. And we've identified 7 hectares which we're currently working through options for. In terms of year-end passenger numbers, we think that weakness will continue. We're predicting a passenger volume of around 530,000 passengers, so 5% below the SOI and around 3% below last year. I'll now hand over to Jonathan to finish on the financials.
So for the full year coming up, it's forecasting at the moment a loss after tax of about 1.1 million. That's a distinction from the half year result, which is about a $1.45 million profit. So there's a bit of a swing expected in the second half of the year. So that's largely being driven by the terminal demolition commencing, which means we start writing off the existing building. So to put that in context, last year our depreciation for the whole year was 2.2 million. But this year we're expecting it to be 7.3 with that write-off beginning. So that is the big driver behind why we're swinging from profit in the first half to a loss in the second. The headlines behind that 1.1, sort of 17 million of income, 10.6 of expenses, both of which are between 4 and 5% below budget, and then the bigger variances on interest and depreciation we just talked about. That's $7.9 million, which is 13% below the budget. So all up, that drives the 40% improvement against SOI. But notwithstanding the loss position that we're forecasting, the dividend expectation is still in line with what was included in the statement of expectation, which is a $300,000 dividend for this year.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That concludes our discussion.
So are you happy to take some questions? My first question is about the progress of the non-strategic land of 7 acres. Hectares, sorry. Can you talk about that in a little bit more detail? Or is it confidential?
Do you want to? Okay. So we've identified land, excuse me, around the Milson Line area of our airport, which falls outside of any operational requirements and is quite a distance away from our core Ruapehu Aeropark. So we've looked closely at whether there's an opportunity to divest and not impact on operations, and the board have made a decision last month that we can declare that land surplus and commence commercial discussions.
So what's the value?
Well,
Don't want to talk about it.
we don't want to be too
Okay.
explicit on the value, but we do see that there's a few $1 million that we can raise via that sale.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to other questions. Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, team. I just had one question on page 156 of our papers, which is page 13 of the report from your end. Just around the, on note 7, the general administration marketing cost of 450,000, that's primarily sponsorship, isn't it?
No, it's a range of things. There's a bit around the terminal development, engagement of third-party comms, for example, but it's a general ramp up in marketing, which has been quite suppressed the last few years since COVID. So we're really trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID.
Thank you. And my other question was around the warehouse in Zone D. I recall probably at least the last presentation you made, but perhaps the one before that, you said we were close to a deal there. Could we just get an understanding of when you say you're close, how close you are?
Shall I put it like this? We'd like to be so much closer. This has been going on for quite some time. It is a blue chip national company, and we're quite confident that they're taking this very seriously, as we are. We believe that it is at their board level, and we're hopeful that there will be a decision. Even if it is a negative, we would rather that than continue on with a hope that that might turn to a positive. So I would like to think this is definitely within the next 1 to 2 months.
Understood. Thank you, Murray. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. Just further to Councillor Wood's question, so in one of the slides there it said Zone Zone D freight, the construction contract had been signed. So is that in prep to it?
Yeah, that's the aspiration, that it is signed within the second half of this financial year.
Okay, it's going to be signed. Yep. Okay, cool. Does the airport have a buy local policy or any weighting in your procurement when you make decisions?
Not specifically, but the vast majority of the construction work that's been done over the last decade has been undertaken by local companies. With regards to the terminal, we can talk a bit more about that in the SOI, but there is very much a focus on local content.
Okay, thank you. And just my final one, obviously the passengers have been static, you've emphasised that, I think everyone knows as a reward in the country. How the revenue has been holding up? You know, you've got freight, you've got training, you've obviously got other rentals in it. Without giving away too much in a common manner, I mean, how are you heading in those areas?
Well, the good thing is those ones are pretty inelastic, so they've remained pretty flat. We haven't seen a drop in those two areas.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you very much. So we'll look to move the recommendation, and we have got a second recommendation, so I'll look to move it, seconded by Councillor Wood. And we can put the second recommendation up as well. Now, we can either take them together or separately. I'm happy to move them together, but if everybody wants to have them separately, I'm happy with that as well. Looking for the look around the room. Anybody want them separately? Councillor Naylor.
I can't make that decision yet. I was just interested to hear the mover talk a bit more about recommendation 2 and what the main purpose of that would be.
Okay, so I'll talk about recommendation 2. Recommendation 2 is around just asking for a briefing from the airport company. I put my glasses back on. So that we could, prior to the construction commencing, and for a detailed plans for the terminal development. That's all we're asking for, is a briefing, nothing more than that. And so it's presented to us as council. So that's what we're asking for, so that we've just got that as a council. That's what recommendation 2 is. I've stirred up more questions. The Mayor.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, the confidentiality part is around if there's anything commercially sensitive, I suppose, of the airport. Is that the reason it's confidential?
That's the reason why it's
Okay.
confidential.
Could it, and look, a question to you as the mover, to get us all back together again, and have the airport company and find a suitable date and not hold up their commencement on construction, I just wonder if that confidential briefing could even be online,
Could
if
be.
possible, if it's just an information sharing.
It is information share. It could be however way it suited everybody.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Yes, so I understood that the construction, or at least the demolition, was imminent. And can I have a question of the airport board of the? Can I understand the timing of the demolition at least, when that's intended, and when the construction date was to actually start putting new foundations for the new complex?
You'd like me to answer that? So the contractor, main contractor, has gone back to all of the subcontractors as well as themselves to supply us, the board, with the financials, the final contract cost, which they will be furnishing to us at the end of this month. It was meant to be next week, but it is now the end of this month. As such, the board of Palmerston North Airport Limited has agreed upon a separate board meeting targeted for the 8th of May to approve or not approve that contract and the cost associated with it. If it is approved, then construction will and movement into the new the temporary terminal, and construction will commence within a week.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
My question relates to page 182 of our papers, or 11 of your report, and the 4 bullet points that have been included that have been carefully considered by the board and management and have been included in the design, particularly those 4 things: the raising of the level, the bigger terminal footprint, the selection of laminated timber beams.
Excuse me, councillor, that's the next paper.
Apologies. It's item 13.
Yeah, so that's the next paper.
Okay, I'll hold off that question till
yeah.
next.
It was a good question.
Apologies. So my question in relation to recommendation 2 then, because this is quite closely connected to this information in the next paper, is there further information that we would expect to gain from this meeting that wasn't provided at the meeting with the airport last week?
Well, that's what we are asking for. That's what this briefing will be about.
Okay, thank you.
We don't know till we don't know it. Don't know. Okay, we'll look to vote. Oh, two. It passed 6 votes for and none against. Right, we'll now move to item 13. Page 159 in your papers. Right, I'll hand back over to you.
Madam Chair and elected members again, this report, as you're aware, is part of the accountability cycle for the company. You adopted a statement of expectations back in November. That's been forwarded on to the company, and they've taken that into consideration in the preparation of this draft SOI. There's a lot of detail in the draft, and they've got quite a bit of information to present to us to substantiate their position. So it's appropriate now, I think, to pass over to them as before.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson, and I might say your briefing was very informative. Thank you very much. As Steve has mentioned, the council as a shareholder has provided us with a statement of expectation for coming years, or for the coming year and beyond, and we believe that's not only a good thing, it gives us clarity very much about what the shareholder expects, rather than any surprises that might otherwise occur. So it's very clear in the expectations. We believe that the SOI, our Statement of Intent, is equally clear in providing assurance of delivery against those expectations. And that is evident when you go through all of the document itself, but also in our presentation, which will soon follow. One thing that is very clear to us, and we've said this year in, year out, is that we have a hierarchy of priorities. The first one is the aeronautical aspects of our operation, that our ability to use the aeronautical space and the assets required for aeronautical activity. And we hold those very dear to us and protect them first and foremost. They are our highest priority. Our second priority is around the landside assets and structures and processes that support those aeronautical activities. In particular, this is our terminal, our car parking facilities, and so on. And we do know that there are generational expenditures on those things, and that's what's facing us in the immediate future. The third of our priorities is around commercial opportunities. These are those things that benefit and strengthen the shareholders' worth in the organisation. It's where we can convert some of those, if I could call them assets that need enhancing. We can get higher value from them, and we'll certainly look to do that within our SOI and our intentions. I believe it's a well-considered approach to this, Madam Chair. The debt levels that we've suggested are well within our ability to afford them. We have also said, though, that to create a buffer and to ensure that we are not going too far, we are proposing some land sales, and as the CEO has already alerted, we have declared some land as surplus, and we'll start going through the Section 40 process very shortly. We're not overly aggressive in terms of, we don't see this as a speculation. In fact, we've got 5 capital projects in our plans, and all of those have an aeronautical base and activity, and we would not commence them until such time as the customer has agreed that they want those and has committed to them. Therefore, we'll be responding to customer need. So lastly, I simply say that we've got some prudent and sustainable debt levels. We've got activities that we believe will enhance shareholders' values and requirements of the organisation. Lastly, the team that can deliver this. Confident year that we'll be able to deliver the SOI over the coming years, and once again, you'll find that there is no requirement for new capital. We require, and we include the expectations of the shareholder in terms of dividend payments right across the term. Thank you.
Thank you. You happy for questions?
Well, I would really like to go through the presentation. It is quite detailed because there are 2 significant aspects. One that we've been talking about for some time, which is our terminal, and getting that, we're right at that stage now where you'll start to see some footprints and how we're going to manage that. Particularly, this is going to be disruptive, and we know that. So we've got to be very mindful of how we can mitigate that disruption. So we'll be showing you that, as well as the intentions to develop those assets, create value to them. We've got some coverage on that as well, Madam Chair.
Yep, so who's taking us through that? Great.
David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Murray. Thanks, Steve. I won't dwell on this one. It's spoken to by Steve and Murray, but essentially this shows the linkage between the statement of expectation received from the Mayor in November through to our statement of intent and how we reflect the objectives within what we call our 5 Cs, our 5 strategic pillars. Straight into the terminal development and just fleshing out a bit more about around what Murray said earlier. We have reached the 80% detailed design threshold. In other words, the plans have been released to the contractor and they are now, as Murray mentioned, working with subcontractors on pricing up that design. We hope to receive that price later in the month, as Murray mentioned. On the 8th of May, also as Murray mentioned, there will be a special board meeting where management will present the costs, the plans and the program to the board for approval. And following that process and the process that has been flagged today, we will be awarding, subject to the price and program, awarding the contract to the contractor. And we would expect demolition to happen or start to happen within a week. I'm not sure how long demo is. I don't know. 3 months or so, and then construction of the western wing will commence. The temporary terminal is ready. Many of you would have seen the tent structures that are sitting at the eastern end of the terminal, so that's ready to go. Essentially within the valet car park is the check-in and departures area. That is ready for Air New Zealand and Origin Air to move in once they're given the green light. So just again summarising that timeline just very quickly. 8th of May is that a board decision day, followed shortly thereafter by the demolition, and then construction of the western wing will happen. Stage 1, which is the western end of the terminal, will take approximately 1 year, at which time we will decant from the temporary terminal into the new western wing, and at that stage the eastern end of the terminal will be demolished and reconstructed, and all going to plan will be completed, the full terminal will be completed mid-27, so essentially a 2-year build. As flagged in the documentation, our concept had a price of 40 million. That concept was developed in early 23, and as we've alluded to, the actual final price is likely to be north of that. Notwithstanding ongoing value engineering, we have made some considered improvements to the amenity of the terminal, which Councillor Naylor was alluding to earlier, I think, around the finished floor level of the terminal. That's a flood mitigation risk. Around the extension of the wind lobby along the airside frontage of the terminal to provide our customers with as much weather protection as we possibly can. Through to the use of LVL timber within the public-facing areas of the terminal, and a marginally larger footprint, which I think is around 140 square metres. There were some key value engineering opportunities that we've taken advantage of, which include swapping out core steel or structural steel for core steel rather, and reducing the roof heights at each end of the terminal, and a range of other small items. So there has been throughout this program a balancing act that's been undertaken where we've looked at value engineering opportunities, again driving down to that 40 million concept price, but equally that has been offset by very considered enhancements to the terminal that we believe are reasonable. Just the next point, and I know Jonathan will talk to it a bit more later on, there's been a range of assumptions made around audit treatment of some of the financials associated with the new terminal, whether things go to balance sheet or P&L. So we've had a go at that with some guidance from external parties, but it's fair to say that it might not be how the actuals look once we're through to financial year end of F26 next year. It's also worthy to note that we're not seeing dividends impacting by the terminal borrowings. The incremental commercial revenue that comes from the new terminal will offset any detrimental impact of additional interest charges from the debt. Just quickly, just to show you what the temporary terminal looks like. Maybe a little bit hard to sort of comprehend from this picture, but if you can imagine the second baggage reclaim belt that we have in the terminal today, that will become the primary belt. If you know your bearings, the rental car kiosks have been removed from the terminal and they're now out by the rental car park, and it's been replaced with a cafe, very similar to the layout upstairs in terms of the cafe bar servery area. If we come through, you'll see the valet area is the smaller red rectangle, and that will be our check-in and departure area. And the green dotted line, if you can make that out, that is the tented structure that will extend the area available to us for our toilets, for a departure lane, and also for the back of house bag makeup area. In total, we estimate we'll be working out of an area of 2,200 square metres, and that includes the regional lounge upstairs, and that's about half of what we're working in today. So you'll appreciate it is going to be tight for people. We're spending a lot of time around disruption, talking to the airlines, working with our staff on how we manage and give people enough warning as to what's happening. It's a necessary evil. We've got no other choice. Essentially, we'll be in that facility for around a year. Just some snapshots of what's been happening in the terminal. The top two pictures on the left are the valet shed. So that, as I mentioned, is going to be check-in and departures. To the right of that is a snapshot of the rental car portacoms, which are in the rental car park. And at the right-hand end of that is our terminal and facilities management offices. Down the bottom left is our temporary airport help desk, which is located where the big screen used to be. And then there's a picture of the cafe, which is in the rental car area. And then finally, that's a picture of our public toilets, which are just outside the valet shed under that tented roof I mentioned. We also have accessible toilets within the terminal. Here's some artist's impressions of the terminal itself, the new terminal, both from airside, being the top one, and then to landside on the bottom right. Key points to note, as you're aware from the SOI, we've worked with Rangatane Manawatu on this design. So Warren Warbrick and Peter Tarangi have been at the table for the past 18 months helping us with this design. So it represents or will continue to represent the legend of Haunui Nanea, which is the current narrative we have in our terminal, but we've added two further elements, being Ereni Te Awi and the Cloak of Peace. And if you look at the roof structure of the terminal, you can imagine that's a cloak that's draped across the terminal building. If you look very closely, you'll see the timber diagrid formation. That is representative of the Tānako pattern that you'd find on Ereni's cloak also. Within the terminal, these are a little bit hard to see, but you'll notice the use of the LVL timber. Now this is to represent the forests that were very much part of the Palmerston North area centuries ago, and the ceiling is representative of the forest trees and with bird life above them. So the second purako or narrative that's come into the terminal is around Matangi, which speaks to Matangi who watched as birds would descend to the skies from the forests and travel to faraway places and then return to Palmerston North. So that's very much part of our our narrative now, and again, along with the legend of Haunui Nanaya, and you can see that coming through in the floor, which is depicting navigation, if you like.
David, we're short on time. Have we got many slides to go?
I can fast track.
Cool, that'd be great, thank you.
Right, straight into the commercial opportunities. This year we'll be spending, F26, we'll be spending 4.5 million on airside infrastructure, ongoing pavement upgrades essentially, airside. 5.8 million on landside infrastructure. We've got the terminal loop road upgrades, which are ongoing, and many of you would have seen what we've already done in the last couple of months on the entrance. We have a water main upgrade, investment in a cargo car park, and investment in additional covered walkways for our customers in the car park. Just to note also, beyond the 3-year SOI, we are programming a runway overlay, a full overlay, which will happen perhaps 28, 29 onwards, depending on runway condition. We talked a little bit earlier about the commercial opportunity with in terms of freight, but we've also got aeromedical hangars that we're looking at constructing, a rental car facility for valeting of rental cars, and working with the School of Aviation on a halls of residence opportunity. And as Murray mentioned, of course, any of these commercial developments are subject to tenant demand. We talked to the logistics opportunity, just very quickly, 3,000 metre facility shown broadly in that red rectangle, and there'll be an opportunity for a second warehouse in the future should demand exist, and that's that light green area with roadways in between in pink. I'll now hand over to Jonathan on the financials.
So just very quickly on the CapEx for the first year of the SOI, $31.9 million, very much dominated by the terminal, just over 20 million that year, and $9 odd million on the Aeropark, and then some rats and mice on some core infrastructure upgrades, airside infrastructure. Over the 3-year SOI, the terminal's still the dominant spend, so getting up towards 35 million of CapEx. Aeropark, with those 5 developments we've talked about, mentioned earlier, a little over 25 million, and then it's the BAU for the remainder, 73 million total. We've talked about in the last year or two about looking at opportunities to how we're going to grow in a faster way. So we've been very much going through a process to look at the various options open to us to achieve that. So all options were put on the table. That includes looking at share issuance at the P&AL level, establishment of joint ventures, partnerships with third parties on property-related activities, looking at setting up our own subsidiary purely focused on property, refinancing our debt facilities today or growing them, and then divestment of non-strategic land like we've talked about. And through that process, we've had independent advice sitting alongside us, making sure that we are considering the right elements as we progress. PwC have been heavily involved in guiding us on this. So the board late last year came to a view on the approved strategy to pursue from here on in, the short to medium term. So starting as with the divestment of the non-strategic we've covered off earlier. We're looking to retain the existing PNCC LGFA facility at its existing level of $50 million. And then we're looking to refinance the $15 million debt facility we have today with BNZ up to a total of $40 million facility. So it's an additional debt of $25 million. So just to break that debt down a little bit more, the blue up there is the $50 million that we just talked about with the shareholder. The 15 is our existing debt with BNZ, and then we're talking about a $25 million new facility on top of that to take us to $90 million in total, 40 million of that being the external debt is all refinanced. This looks at how that plays out over the 3-year SOI period. So the column on the left is that same graph as before, showing the total facility available, FY26, you can see there that we're looking at about 40.9 million of total debt, not drawing down any of that new debt facility we're seeking to raise. It's well within our existing debt facility. Then in year 2, FY27, we then start tapping into that new facility, $6.9 million of it, and 9 million total by year 3. So we're talking a $25 million additional debt facility on top of our current, of which 9 is drawn down by the end of year 3 of the SOI. Adding on total assets there, as you can see with the growth in debt, total assets grow as well. That debt is being reinvested into commercially feasible commercial assets that derive rental incomes. They're all for revenue generating activities. So why $25 million of additional debt facility? Murray touched on earlier about using our existing asset base to drive further returns. There's a lot of under-leveraged assets out at the airport at the moment, which we can reasonably simply gear up to drive better, efficient returns than we've seen in the past. Debt is also the fastest and simplest to implement if you compare it to, say, equity, for example, and it also maximises the control that's maintained by both the council and the airport company. We've been very deliberate in how much debt we're looking to seek, the $25 million. A lot of work has gone into making sure that that's a prudent and sustainable level of debt. A lot of stress testing has been undertaken to look at what would happen if there were downside risks to revenue or costs, or higher capex than forecast. What would that mean? And ensure that 25 still keeps you very comfortably within maximum prudent covenants. It's designed to meet investment grade shadow credit ratings, so ensuring we're not dipping below what a Standard & Poor's sort of equivalent would consider us as investment grade, and it's not at all out of line with our peers and equivalent size organisations. We also have to maintain an appropriate level of headroom for that rainy day fund. Having a higher debt facility means that we grow that level of headroom as we grow to make sure that we've got debt capacity there for if and when it ever was required. And we've also been very careful in putting in place the appropriate procedures and policies to manage that higher debt level than what we've got today. I guess importantly, we don't take anything off the table. This is the short-term solution that can be put in place very quickly to get things going quicker, but the plans are still very much around progressing partnerships and looking at the land divestment we've talked about in conjunction with the debt. Those priorities haven't changed.
Just briefly, some other updates. Underlying everything we do, as Murray talked about earlier, is safety and compliance. So the key focus is, of course, maintaining our zero harm approach to people that work at the airport or use our airport, and CAA Part 139 compliance, and of course district plan is very important to us too. In terms of sustainability, again, we have reached 80% reduction in Scope 1 and 2 in total, 40% in the last year, I believe. We're getting close to what we can get down to in terms of Scope 1 and 2. I think 43,000 tonnes left. It's essentially diesel from mowing grass and from rescue fire appliances. So we're looking at ways we can offset that, being guided by ACA in terms of what is appropriate under their certification standards. In terms of the TDP, we're about to undertake a life cycle assessment. We're close to finishing detailed design, as we've mentioned. 80% design drop happened in Feb, 100% design drop, I believe, has just happened. So once that's available, we'll be looking at a life cycle assessment of the terminal, and we'll be coming back to you all and the public with a narrative around our sustainability credentials. That just shows where we're at now in terms of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions. As I said, 43,000 tonnes. And again, it's diesel, essentially, that's the driver. Sponsorship remains really important to us, and thanks, Councillor Wood, for your question. I think 90,000 is the budget for sponsorship in F26, and you'll see on that page some of the strategic sponsorships that we're very fond of. And, we recognise very much that social licence is part of us. We need to maintain our relationships with our community. We can't rest on our laurels. Disrupts from the new terminal, air noise, etc. they're all things that we consider every day. Sponsorship is very important to us. And just finally, we mentioned earlier, we talked about passenger forecasts. Again, current year, we're looking at being 5% below SOI. Muted growth is our story for the next 3 years as well, where we're suggesting or projecting circa 2% per annum growth in passenger volumes. As I mentioned earlier in the previous discussion, the relationship with Air New Zealand is very strong, and so that is very favourable for us in terms of what we can achieve in terms of passenger numbers. The A320 pathway is very much part of our next 3 years, and it's encouraging to see government's involvement in supporting regional aviation. So it's not all about Air New Zealand, as we'll appreciate. There's other airlines out there like Air Chatham's, Origin Air, Sounds Air, Barrier Air, etc., that have a really important role to play and could play a role here at Palmerston North as well. And as mentioned to the Mayor earlier, air freight is holding up under the conditions. Back to you, Jonathan.
Home stretch here. Just a couple of observations on the financials, which you will have in your packs. EBITDA, the green line along there, grows very healthily across the whole three-year SOI period. There's a couple of red line numbers in there which are higher than usual in a couple of the years. Those are very much terminal, temporary driven, but they are the reason why this year and next year we start seeing the financial performance be a bit below where we would normally see it in a standard year. But importantly, the dividends aren't reflective of that lower profit level. We have followed the statement of expectation in that respect. Debt facility on the 3-year SOI period goes up to $74 odd million compared to the total facility available of $90 million. It's in line with what we talked about earlier. Importantly, I guess the two green buckets there are those ratios that demonstrate that the level of debt that we're looking at remains prudent and sustainable. We're well below the 60% threshold on the debt to debt plus equity ratio and well above the 2.5 interest cover ratio. And then just lastly, looking further out ahead, we've also prepared a 10-year model on the assumption that we stop doing development in the business park after the 3 years. This demonstrates what would happen if we were to return to sort of business as usual, to demonstrate how debt is serviced over the long term. So you can see their profit continues to grow strongly. Those ratios all continue to improve. They will continue to improve. That is us.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very thorough presentation. Thank you very much. Ready for questions? Okay, we'll start off with Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for your report. So I've got some questions, first of all, about the assumptions that you've made around the debt servicing. So there's a note which I presume is from Steve in 6.3, talking about potential risks in the debt servicing in the report that we've got from staff. So I wondered, what assumption have you made about interest rates over the period of time?
6% is the default assumption on interest rates.
Okay. And what's your assessment of the risk of you being unable to service the debt that you're predicting to be drawing down?
Low. We've deliberately taken a conservative approach in the amount of debt that we're suggesting there. There's been a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, scenario modelling done on what would happen if some of those key assumptions change to make sure that even at that level of debt, the ratios are all well within prudent levels.
So you've modelled it on a low passenger growth, but a relatively high growth in income. So where's that other growth in income coming from?
Our pricing with Air New Zealand is fixed over the next three-year period with reviews after that. So there are wash-ups with Air New Zealand. If passenger numbers are below where they're forecast, they then get recovered in a later period. So, and we have agreement and transparency with them about the pricing going forward for 8+ years.
Okay, but in that last slide, I think it was that you had up there, you had income increasing over the 10-year, the 10-year forecast, which I accept is outside the SOI period, much higher than just could be related to increase in passenger numbers. So what's the other income increase?
So that is the commercial revenue return coming from primarily the terminal development. So we will start, once the terminal is built, we start recovering through landing charges, the cost that we spent to build the terminal.
Okay, right. So it's not reliant on increase in passenger numbers?
No.
Okay, cool. And then in terms of just the decision itself to increase the bank facility to increase your debt capacity as opposed to any of the other options that you had listed up there, can you explain, I know it says in our notes flexibility, but perhaps you could put a bit more to that as to why you decided to go for a bank loan rather than any other option?
So the reason for that was that we believe we have the capacity to do it. Doesn't mean to say we wish to do it alone. The immediacy is that if we were to raise the funds ourselves, we don't become reliant on someone else's process right here, right now. It doesn't signal, though, that we will not be looking for that in the future. We'd be quite happy to have a partnership with some other entity. It might be on a particular build or it might be on a particular zone, but we wanted to get this underway, and we can do it faster than by waiting for a partnership to eventuate.
And so why was what I would assume would be a cheaper option of going through the LGFA, why was that discounted?
It hasn't been discounted at all. It's just that the plan at this stage is to go with the bank debt with a revisit in time about where we go for in the future. We've seen recent examples in the market where LGFA interest rates have been less favourable for infrastructure airports than commercial bank rates. We've had a lot of conversations with the banks about their appetite and hunger for lending to infrastructure companies such as ours. There is a great deal of appetite out there, and we're expecting very competitive terms. So we're not anticipating a great interest rate differential between the LGFA rates and what we will be able to achieve through the commercial banks. It's also the flexibility we touched on before about why a bank is more suitable at this stage than LGFA. LGFA is very good for core stable lendings at a time when you've got very good stable debt. We're in a period of growth where we're growing quite substantially, quite quickly. Timeframes do change from month to month about exactly how much you need to draw at any given time. LGFA is quite a rigid and slow process for drawing debt. So the bank provides that flexibility over the next few years with a view to then looking at, do we need to refinance that in due course with LGFA, either directly or indirectly, depending on the appetite at the time.
Okay, and then just finally, since I'm freshly back from the Planning Institute conference in Invercargill, there was a very good presentation on project planning and overruns, and top of the list for overruns were airport. So I'm interested to know what you might have planned for your terminal redevelopment if it doesn't fit within the financial envelope that you've set.
So we've made a conscious decision to retain the existing project managers because of their intimate knowledge of the project. We have independent engineer to contract, and we'll continue to use a QS so we can keep control of monthly program and costs. It's probably a little bit more straightforward now that we get into construction. And so we're confident that the processes that we have in place will enable us to keep on top of costs.
So you're not anticipating that you'll need to use any of that increased lending facility to increase the costs for the terminal?
At this stage, no. as we've mentioned, we'll have a cost in a couple of weeks' time. That might give us a little bit more of a feel for what may be ahead of us. But right now, no, we're confident with the processes that we've developed over the last 18 months will hold us in good stead.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, team. I'd just like to ask a few questions about the Ruapehu Aero Park. So, of the 38 hectares of developable land that's available, how much has been developed to date? A rough number, fine.
While they're doing the maths, I can tell you that there's seven hectares that is what we have deemed to be surplus. So that's about 15% or so of the total. The rest of it, though, how much has been developed is actually on sites that aren't defined as in they are not lots divisible by ownership. You know, the whole airport zone down, say, Airport Drive is one great piece of land. So we haven't got off the top of our head how many square metres there are that have actually been developed in each of those.
That's right. Well, so just to ask about that 7 hectares, my understanding was that was not part of the Ruapehu Aero Park land. That was land up on Milson Line. So is that 7 hectares included in the 38, or is that on top of the 38?
The 38 is a gross area for Ruapehu Aero Park, so it includes roadways and things that Murray alluded to. The 7 hectares is outside of that, Councillor.
It's outside of that, thank you. So when did the Ruapehu, it was then called the Ruapehu Business Park, when did that first go to the market? Was it 2016, 2017, somewhere around there?
Under the name Ruapehu Business Park, that's correct, but we had, there was previous regimes were looking at commercialising that land as well, maybe 15 years ago.
What was correct? Was it 2015, sorry, or 2016?
Beg your pardon?
When did it first go to the market? Was it 2015?
Under the name Ruapehu Business Park at the time, it was probably around then that we started promoting it, and the first cabs off the rank, as you'll remember, were the Thrifty Instant Windscreens building, followed by the Massey School of Aviation.
Thank you. And they're no longer owned by the airport, or are they owned by the airport?
Both of those are owned by the airport. Yep.
All right, thank you. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. I just want to clear up a couple of things. One is just in respect of the airside $4.5 million investment there. You've said that's pavement upgrades, but can you tell us what that is? Is that something to do with the apron, or?
Main apron works. Northern side of the main apron is being upgraded to enable jets to use both taxiway Bravo and Charlie.
So is that an extension, or is it strengthening? It's
strengthening of an existing area.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And the other question was just really around sort of passenger numbers. The 6 monthly report says you've had a 4% downturn this year, but then your SOI is actually saying that you're expecting a 2% growth in passenger numbers. Are the two incongruent? What's happening there?
That's a good question. We have worked with Air New Zealand on this. We remain optimistic that things will turn within the SOI period. Perhaps maybe not immediately, but 2% is our long run average, 2.4% I think, if we look at long run average. So we've dropped back from that, but we're still optimistic.
And that would sort of take into account sort of the economic headwinds that we're currently experiencing, and perhaps even the fallout from the tariff fiasco?
Well, maybe not the tariff fiasco, because that's the last week or so, but again, we've worked very closely with Air New Zealand around what we think their seat capacity will be, and typically they are quite aggressive and bullish, but they've agreed with us at the levels that we have that are quite conservative.
So is there something going on around sort of what's happening globally at the present time?
Not right now, no. We haven't turned our minds to what the tariffs might mean, if that's what you mean, Councillor.
Yep, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Most of my questions relate to page 197 of our report, which is the statement of financial performance. Some of my questions have partially been answered. The one that Councillor Hancock just mentioned in terms of the current downturn in passenger numbers of 3% and the projection of passenger numbers to increase by 2%. And you said you're optimistic about that. Is the assumptions in terms of the aeronautical charges, does that include an increase in charges, the Air New Zealand costings, as on top of the passenger number increases? Because the graphs that you showed us in the presentation looked quite flat in terms of your projections, but the increase from currently 11.5 million to 14.8 million is quite a bit over 3 years. So is that because the cost actually is with Air New Zealand is a lot higher, or are you presuming there's a lot more growth in that time?
That's correct. It is the rate per passenger is anticipated to increase because of the new capital works coming online.
Okay, thank you. And the answer to Councillor Johnson's question around the commercial return from the terminal development, and I think you said land charges. Is that correct? Is that
landing charges?
Landing charges. So where it says car park and leases, is that not what you're talking about?
No.
So you're talking. So the landing charges are the aeronautical charges.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. So thank you for that clarification. So in terms of the operating expenditure, this is the first time I've looked at a statement of intent where it goes down over the next 3 years, currently from 10.5 million to 9.5 in 3 years. What's the rationale behind expecting the operating expenditure to be reducing?
It's largely coming through that extraordinary items line, which is the demolition costs associated with the terminal as a short-term cost, and temporary terminal costs are short-term costs, so those bleed out, disappear in the later years of the SOI.
Okay, so the administration expenditure at the middle line there goes from 5.1 this year. It's actually 5.1 in 3 years' time. I mean, do you expect that your staff won't have a wage increase, or are you downsizing? Or I'm just trying to understand why that would be static.
Again, there are some costs in the current year, particularly around this debt project that we've talked about, which are adding to the costs this year, which are one-offs, which should fall out in the following year.
Okay, thank you. And then just, sorry, be with me, I'm getting there. The interest costs down further, currently 662,000, that increasing by about 660% to 4.4 million in 3 years' time. That additional cost, I've heard the statement made a few times now where you've said that the dividends are not impacted by the terminal borrowings, and you've said that that's because the commercial return will offset the debt costs. So I'm just wanting to understand that increase in costs in terms of the interest to service that debt. Do you not think that that increase in cost would have an impact on what otherwise would be available in terms of dividends if that debt was not incurred?
You mentioned earlier the aeronautical charges line also growing. That's where the offset is for the interest increase. The landing charges go up, but the interest charges also go up for the debt to pay for that. So the interest charges, the aeronautical income increase offsets the interest expense.
So would we not still get aeronautical charge increase without the terminal development?
No.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful to know. Now, my other questions are on page 160. In 3.4, no, I've asked that already. So in 3.6, it talks about the landside infrastructure and so the landside infrastructure, I think you talked a little bit about that last week at the meeting and talked about covered walkways, etc. How much of that landside infrastructure that's planned is non-essential?
Yeah, well, 1.2 million is covered walkways. Let you judge whether that's non-essential. The others are loop road upgrade, sewage or a water trunk upgrade. And what was the other one? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And my final question relates to the debt, where you're accessing your debt. A few years back when we had conversations with you about utilising the LGFA for the 50 million, there was a clear view that that was a better option than the banks and that was better rates, and therefore that's why you were coming to us. There's obviously been quite a shift in that you're viewing the bank debt or loan as perhaps more favourable. What has changed during that time that
I think
view?
this was asked by Councillor Johnson. She asked the same question. I don't want to keep repeating questions, so that was asked by Councillor Johnson. Unless they're going to give a different answer.
I didn't.
You're not going to give a different answer. So it was asked by Councillor Johnson.
Oh, I thought it was a bit of a different question, but that's fine.
That was the same question.
Okay, I'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Easy one from me. Recycling, there was a slide mentioned plant and equipment. That's to put back into the new terminal, would it?
That's correct. So whether we can reuse the concrete foundation of the existing terminal, etc. Our HVAC is relatively new in the current terminal, so we'll be putting that back in the new terminal.
Thank you. Is there a plan in place to repurpose things that won't be used? Recycle other bits and pieces?
There is. We have been doing that to date. For example, we've decanted from the corporate office and we've removed glass and doors and handles and things and put them into the temporary premises. So there is very much a plan to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. Just have a question around the intent to use the $25 million of new debt around Aeropark and diversification of the business. As I understand it, you're hoping to do that rather than see it sunk into the terminal. Getting nods, that's great. I guess just a bit further to Councillor Johnson's question, so just what options are actually available to PNCC, and this might be for officers, what options are available to PNCC to put in place an assurance that we wouldn't see the $25 million get sucked over into terminal?
It's a better question.
I'm not sure that there's anything particular that we could put into place other than an expectation, perhaps, in the way in which we wrote our feedback from today.
Well, it seemed to me the most dramatic option would be not to approve it.
Not to approve.
Just to say no to the 25 million would be one option. I'm wondering if there's some intermediate options that are a bit less drastic than that would still provide the community some assurance that it's not just a blank check that turns into more terminal.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not sure that it's for the council to say no to the 25 million. That's something for the board itself to determine what's an appropriate level of debt, and provided it fits within the council's view about the various ratios that we think are appropriate for a subsidiary of ours, then that's, I think, for the board to determine how to go about that.
Perhaps, Councillor Barrett, I could also assure you that when we present both our SOI and our financials as both our interim and our financials, they are accountability documents for which we have to be held accountable. And if we have indicated that there are certain things that are intended to happen, then that's what should happen, and we would have to have a very good discussion about why, if it has not occurred as we would expect it to do so. We could equally put in something when we provide you with that confidential briefing about the amount of funds that are going there and any process that would be required if it were to exceed. Already there is a council officer who sits in on the discussions around the property and terminal development committee. So there is actually a link back to PNCC. But we could provide some other assurances or other means by which you can gauge that.
Thanks. In order to change the could to a would or a will, is that something that you would need formal direction through this meeting, or are you happy on the basis of this conversation to build something in?
We'd be happy to build that in. We are, yes.
Thank you.
It's not a could, it's a we will do that then.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was just one final question that I had started to ask in the last item, which I forgot to then ask now, which is page 182, and those 4 bullet points which the board and management have included in the terminal development plan. I just was interested in understanding the dollar value to those 4 aspects being included. The increase in footprint, the timber beams, the wind lobby, etc.
If we could, Madam Chair, we could report back on that. I haven't got them in front of me here, each of them, but I can assure you that in each one we looked at it and deemed that while there was an additional amount, that it was necessary for the customer experience, but we will provide you with that information.
Yeah, okay. And when the costs come to you on the 8th of May, do you just reconsider some of those aspects if it's a high cost, or you just proceed with whatever they put in front of you?
We will not be proceeding with whatever they put in front of us. It needs to be within what we believe to be our expectations. And if not, there will be either the need to remove some things, maybe some of these, or seek another value engineering process, or something else. We cannot proceed just because the price has gone up.
Okay, thank you.
Finally, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry, it's just to follow up on an answer that I think Steve gave to Councillor Barrett. So, Steve, if councillors are unhappy with the proposal of the Airport Board to extend their borrowing in this way, what options are open to us today?
Yeah, what we've said in terms of the provision of the funding to the council, for example, through the council, for example, is that this process, the SOI process, is the process where we'd evaluate that, and so that's where we've made that comment. Are they meeting appropriate ratios and the like? Is there a substantive business case behind everything that's being done? Then that's something that is part of this discussion now. If the council was unhappy with the scale of the work that was planned to be done and the way in which they're going to be funding it, then that's, I suppose, part of adopting the SOI as it stands or not. If we were unhappy with the proposal as a council in terms of the total cost, the way it's funded, that's a fundamental part of the SOI, I guess, that we're at odds with and would have to.
So if we were unhappy, we would be voting against recommendation 1, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I imagine so.
And what would be the consequence of that?
Well, the company would be unable to proceed to deliver what the expectation is that they deliver, particularly in relation to the terminal.
No, I don't think. Would we then direct them to come back with a different statement of intent, or is it just when we're unhappy with it and we leave it at that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, I guess in the first instance we'd have to try to narrow down what it was specifically that we were asking them to do that we were unhappy with, and to give that feedback loop back to them so that they could then come back to us with a revised statement.
So would you need an alternative recommendation?
I would have thought so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all the questions for today. Thank you very much. Right, we'll look to move the recommendations. We'll start with recommendations 1. So recommendation, Mr. Mayor, are you happy to move recommendation 1? Yep. Okay, so recommendation 1, we're going to go through them one by one because obviously there's going to be some around the room, some change. So we'll go recommendation 1 and seconded by councillor Wood. It's not receiving it though. It's not receiving it. The first one. So the first one's just receiving it. And then we go to 2. So we might do 1 and 2 together. So you want to have oppositions of 1 and 2 going together? You do? Separate? Okay, we'll go 1 first. We'll have comments on number 1. Mr. Mayor, do you want to comment first? Yeah, no. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thank you to the Airport Board management for coming in and going through their draft statement of intent for the next 3 years. This is quite an important SOI, not that any aren't, but this is probably more important than most in the sense that there's a generational change on what we're trying to do with the airport, and actually in some cases what it's been forced to be having to do. They have a terminal which is earthquake prone. They also have pending changes to the way the aeronautical services are conducted in our country, and they're trying to get ahead of the pack in that sense. Well, actually, I would say probably catching up, because all the other regional airports have done this work. It's sometimes a hard pill to swallow in terms of some of the costs, but if you think about what they're trying to do, in probably the most regulated environment in the country, i.e. the civil aviation environment, it's expensive. So they've done well to actually come back to us with something that I think is quite manageable. And also what they want to do around the diversification and keeping the training opportunities, especially the air freight opportunities, but also just other revenue streams which are all part of a modern day airport company mix these days. So I'm happy with what I'm saying. It's the only thing I would say to the airport company is just keep in touch with us on everything, and because there's a lot going on and there'll be a lot moving in your world in the next 2 years. So not that you don't keep in touch with us, but it's you can do more than you need to do. So thank them for the work to date, and the hard work will begin post May 8th. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if I could ask a question to you in terms of the order that we take this. The Mayor and I have proposed 2 amendments to number 2 that significantly alter the airport company's need to raise debt to support the Ruapehu Aeropark. My support of 1 would be conditional on whether or not those 2 amendments were approved or not by this chamber, because that would materially impact the debt that their statement of intent would be putting. So I wondered if we could perhaps debate the amendments to 2C
We're going
and
to
D
do 1
first.
first and then we'll do 2. Sorry, we have to get 1 over. We have to do 1 first.
Okay.
If I could, through you, Madam Chair, if I could clarify, recommendation 1 is simply receiving it. Doesn't say that you're approving it or agree with it. I think recommendation 2A and B should be taken separately.
It's just receiving. Yeah, it's just to receive the report, but I don't, yeah. Councillor Johnson?
So just to be really clear, I mean, I put the question to Steve a minute ago, and he said, oh no, if you don't agree with it, then vote against number 1. But now we're getting different advice, so I just want to be clear.
This is to receive the report, number 1. I don't know, Steve, if you, I don't know, really.
Sorry, if I could just clarify.
Sorry, I'll go back to David.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood when I responded to the question. Number 1 is just receiving it. It'd be number 2 that would be the one.
Okay, thank you.
We're all clear? Receiving. Okay. Going back to, right, we're going to Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 things I just want to comment on. One, I'm going to support it, and I feel like the considerations are being quite broad. and their information to us to date has been actually, in my view, quite reassuring from where maybe 6 months ago where I had some concerns just around the amount of equity that they were going into with the development that was going to run them dry without any other means of funding. And so this is two parts. The terminal, looking north of 40 million, and in fact in this environment I don't find that enormously surprising considering they're also expanding the footprint. I think that's wise. One of the concerns I had when I went through the walkthrough and seen the original design was that I thought it was a little constraint actually for going down this path for a future-proof terminal. I actually thought it was a little restraint. So actually having a larger footprint and of course those other mitigations around raising the footprint as far as the height for flooding and the wind tunnels for shelter for customer experience, I think they're very wise. I think they're very wise investments. So as far as the terminal approach, I'm very happy, very confident. And then we look at the funding of some of the other commercial opportunity, and it's been very clear from the airport board, from day dot, that the land that sides the airport is strategic, whether it's for the aeronautical activities or if it's a strategic alignment to the activities of the airport. And they've got a large base of land, which is always going to leave them in a strong position. So when they mentioned about the additional borrowing, I think that is smart. They've actually considered that quite well and actually had professional expertise with PricewaterhouseCoopers kind of giving them some input around that. And that's even referencing back in the presentation slide. So this is talking about the number 2, so I won't have to repeat myself.
I was just going to cut you off.
You want me not to keep that again on that?
Yeah, I'm going to cut.
Okay. I'm fully supportive. I think I've considered, and I'm happy to speak as long as you like. On whatever you like.
Actually, would you mind if we leave that for number 2? Because you're
Okay.
actually going into number 2 now.
All right. Well, only in the fact that I think they've well considered and it's appropriate, and I'm very comfortable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. All I want to say, one thing, is thank you very much for a very detailed presentation. You did an amazingly long, good presentation. Thank you very much. Do you want to write a reply, Mr. Mayor? No. Okay, let's vote on receiving this report. Right, passed 16 votes for, none against. The second one we're looking at is 2A, which the council supports the proposed direction and implementation strategy. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. Don't screw your nose up, Councillor Wood. So that's all it is. It's proposed direction and implementation strategy. We're just leaving it at that. I will second that. Because we've got the screwed up nose. Right, who would like to speak? Okay, we'll go the Mayor. Still didn't work. I can't do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if we look at the amendments first, because I think that'll fully inform number 2. And I say that because one of them will actually change the debt facility. The other one really is a smaller infrastructural thing, but I'm quite happy to speak to the whole lot if you'd like me to. Okay, so look, colleagues, B is around sorry, can we just go to B, please? Okay, is around recognising the projected requirement of loans totalling 40.9 million by 30 June, and the airport company will be seeking to use that loan facility. They've given us good reasons of what they're trying to do, and C is around expecting the airport company to consider engaging a commercial development partner. And I don't think they're against that in any means at all. In fact, it's just it's a case of when that comes into play. But I think we've got to signal in some way that we expect to see a partner there at some stage. And I suppose that in a commercial sense, you'd bring that partner on perhaps a little bit later because there's more value in assets, especially after the terminal starts to get out of the ground and perhaps other associated facilities linked to that. The second one there was around, or D, was around, and Councillor Wood can perhaps speak a bit further to this, but this is around exploring opportunities, around divesting some of the developable land to accelerate, to get things, investment out of the ground quicker around the Aero Park and to actually support the whole city's economic growth, and Tutanganui comes into this as well. Now, they're doing some of that now, and I think there was some numbers or percentages banded around before, so they're probably a fair way into that now. And E was really just around the redundant carriageway at the front of the terminal, and I think there was some acceptance that could possibly become a way more welcoming entranceway to the terminal. We're spending 40-odd million on the terminal, and we still have an underutilised roadway, which is, in my opinion, and others, surplus and to requirements there. But the main ones are around how do they deliver what they're trying to do with the debt levels, and remembering that there is good debt and there's bad debt, and I think they've emphasised pretty well what they're trying to do with debt, and I quite liked the credit rating aspects of what they're trying to do, which I thought was pretty well thought out, and I understood it in layman's terms very, very well. So it's quite prudent and it's quite sustainable. I know some people don't like debt, they just like no debt, but actually in this sort of environment, in this sort of level of company, you've got to have debt, but make sure it's good debt, that they've got they're going to have about $170 million worth of assets, right, at the end of the terminal build. They'll have drawn down around 74 million. That's prudent, and it gives them that rainy day ability to do something else if they've got the headroom, exactly like we do as a council. So please support this. I think it is prudent, and it allows the organisation to move, and we don't handicap it in any way, because there will be some other opportunities come. I'm absolutely positive that, with its connection to Tutanganui, and we must allow the company some wriggle room to do things. Thank you.
Okay, we are obviously speaking to all of them. Here we go. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Mayor for giving me the opportunity to second C, D and E. I'd like to talk about where C and D come from, and it's four primary concerns. One is the airport's ability to deliver the Ruapehu Aero Park on their own. Two is councillors' concern around the significant levels of debt that the airport is considering raising as they deliver both projects, the terminal development project and the Aero Park at the same time. And the other concern is around the greater economic benefit to the city of utilisation of the significant amount of developable land that sits alongside Ruapehu Airport Drive. I would ask you councillors to look to Waireka Place, where in the last 10 years, or certainly the last 5 years since that's been in operation, the only two developments that have taken place have been the two plots of land that were sold to private developers that we're now starting to see buildings come off the ground. I have an absolute concern around the airport's decision to not engage a commercial partner in the delivery of that Aero Park. They would benefit from the expertise and the industry knowledge that a commercial partner would bring in developing commercial land. It is not core business for the airport to develop warehousing, and so I think there is absolutely a case, non-financially, for the airport to engage with experts who work in that space. And I would put to councillors that if we continue the approach that we can do it all on our own, we will get 100% of nothing. I would much prefer we work with a partner and get 50% of the income diversification that would come from working with that partner of something. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that we've seen very little development of the 38 hectares available there, and I believe we could see that accelerated considerably. What the airport brings to the party is significant amounts of land. What a commercial development partner may bring to the party could be capital to help build, it could be expertise, it could be a wide range of things. But in and of itself, engaging a partner could have a significant impact on the level of debt that the airport is required to raise as they go through this process. So I think it's prudent that council expects them to consider engaging a development partner for delivering the Aeropark. In terms of D, around divesting some of the commercial land, it only takes a drive out to the Higgins Commercial Park to see the difference in terms of approach. Our approach has been that we only enable leasehold on that land, and we've seen next to no leasehold development, certainly not in the last half a decade. Higgins' approach is to sell land for development, and you've seen huge amounts of buildings pop up in that space. And so respecting that the approach modelled off Christchurch is admirable, that if we could develop this park on our own and get 100% of the return from those commercial buildings, we should. But it appears that we are unable to do that. But there's also a benefit wider to the community, that for the next 2 or 3 or 4 decades, driving down Airport Drive next to paddocks that are undeveloped, there is huge benefit if we were to see those develop, not just for the airport, but for the community at large. And given we are sitting here today in the Economic Development Committee for the city, enabling that growth and getting it off the ground, I believe has more benefit to the community than waiting for 2, 3 or 4 decades for it to be developed by the airport. This in and of itself does the most out of any recommendation to reduce the required debt levels of the airport for the development for over the next 10 years. It reduces in part the requirement of the $27 million that they're looking at leveraging. I wouldn't posit exactly the value of the land, but I would say it would be in the tens of millions of dollars. The 7 hectares that they're already looking at selling is sensible, but that is outside of the 38 hectares of the business park, as was confirmed in questions to the airport today. So to Councillor Barrett's question of how do we stop that $25 million facility being sucked into the terminal development project? Well, one, we do what we did in the last recommendation, which is make sure a confidential briefing is brought back to the council so that we're able to see what those final costings come out at. And 2 is to reduce the amount of debt that is required for the development of the Aeropark. This has benefits to the city, benefits to the airport, and benefits to our commercial and business sector. So I hope you'll support this, council, as a sensible way to get this off the ground.
Thanks, Councillor. Right, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll speak to all of them just in terms of keeping it simple. In terms of recommendation A, supporting the proposed direction, I'm growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction that's being proposed for a number of reasons. Recommendation C and D goes partly away towards alleviating some of those concerns, but probably not far enough for me to support A at this stage. But I will be supporting the additional recommendations C and D, but not E. Just to clarify, I don't share the level of optimism and confidence that's been expressed here today to deliver the statement of intent. And just to be clear, in an environment where the passenger numbers have decreased 3%, to be relying on increases in the coming years, I think is quite optimistic. And given the economic environment and the decision-making for people, often flying is an additional extra that if they can't afford it, they won't do it. And I don't think we've seen the end of tough times yet. I don't necessarily have confidence that those numbers will increase in the coming years, given the current environment. The increase in proposed debt does concern me, and the rewriting of the Treasury policy, despite this PwC input into that, what I'm more concerned about is the level of comfort from our community who owns this asset about how appropriate that is. For me, and I don't think I'd be too dissimilar to many other people, if I consider whether I buy a flight, it's about the convenience, it's about the time it might take me to get somewhere, it's about the cost of that flight. I do not consider whether I've got a covered walkway, how fancy the airport the terminal is at all when I consider my decisions around how I might travel. It simply comes down to those other factors of cost, time and convenience. I don't think that investing into many of those things, of course, will make the experience more pleasant for people. I'm not denying that, but I don't necessarily think that's going to drive increased passenger numbers in the way that's been expected or outlined. The impact of the debt in terms of the interest and the repayment will have an impact on what our community gets in terms of dividends in the coming years. I don't see how that could not be the case. We've had a number of years now of very minimal financial return to our community for the asset that they own, and that has not sat well with me, and I'm not going to be in a position now where I endorse a plan that I feel like is overly optimistic given the current economic environment. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to support, from the outset, I was always supporting A and B. I'm going to indicate that I'll support C and D, but not E. What C and D do is actually just give some wider scope around the development. I think Councillor Woods outlined that pretty fairly, and divesting or diversifying our approach to putting a package together for the long-term success of the airport. So I'm comfortable with that. The equity or the other lending, I've got a level of comfort, and in fact I've increased my level of comfort knowing that the Airport Board are looking at other lines of credit. I think they've considered that well, and I think it's a prudent approach to the development through the additional borrowing. So I've got a high level of comfort around that approach. What I don't have a comfort in is E, when we start suggesting some landscape designs by committee after a strategic asset of the significance of the airport that we think best on how to use that carriageway for whatever purpose without fully appreciating the other intended plans after the development. Clearly they need access for the construction that's safe and convenient to separate the general public as best we can, but the use thereafter, you know, so for me to think that I'm got any qualifications or experience in that space to give a guiding insight to the airport. So strongly against E, but I'll support the others. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and colleagues. Wish that I felt a bit more settled about this whole thing than I do, to be honest. And some of that is memory and history, and how we've kind of gotten to the point of already having quite a significant debt signal there, and now seeing another debt signal come through. And I do appreciate the effort that P&L's put in. Appreciate the Chair's assurances today around bringing back or including in documentation a change process should there be cost escalation. But I'm concerned by not yet seeing that, and concerned that we're kind of trying to do two things at once here that I'm not sure that we actually need to do both of those things right now. I mean, yes, it would have been great if the Aero Park, you know, took off in last decade. It'd be great if it took off this decade. Does it need to take off at the same moment that we're actually pushing through $40 million of new terminal? I'm not convinced of that. My preferred approach would be to have a statement of intent that focused on the terminal development project, getting that right, keeping that within cost, and making any decisions about divestment or other approaches around the Aero Park subsequent to that, subsequent to you know, the trade wars hopefully settling back down and having some sense of whether or not we will be getting back to the kind of numbers of travelers that we saw pre-COVID or not. The reality is things have been pretty static, and I'd say looking at what's happening globally, I can't see those, you know, taking off anytime soon. So I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying I'm probably not in a position to vote in support of A. I strangely am quite in support of E. I think it's a good signal to send, and I've long found the that side of the terminal to be probably less than I would hope for in terms of a user experience. So giving some direction there I would be quite comfortable with. So just thought I'd explain that before I started voting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. And finally, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I find myself entirely in opposition to Councillor Barrett. I am happy to support the proposed direction implementation, and I'm grateful for the additional recommendations that have come forward that I think give some comfort around the room. noting particularly that the language is quite open. So C, council expects PNAL to consider. D, council expects PNL to explore. We're not saying what you have to do. We're saying go away and have a think about this. And I'm quite comfortable with that, recognising that other colleagues might have less comfort there. I'm always encouraged when we as elected members recognise where we don't have professional expertise. Thank you for that, Councillor Dennison. And I won't be supporting E. I think that is entirely to the to PNAL to decide how they use their frontage to best effect, especially in the current building situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Right of reply to the Mayor.
Fantastic, you give me lots of ammo. Look, thanks colleagues. Appreciate not a lot of us do understand the airport's business, even though some of us have been around the table quite a long time. What is the role it play? What does the role that the airport plays? It's not all just about passengers. If you haven't realised, quite a lot of this airport is diversified in terms of its income streams. And I've heard a number of debates around passengers. In fact, I don't think I've heard the word around landing charges, freight, training, medical, lifeline services, and other non-aeronautical income. So that tells me that not everybody here does understand the airport's business. So what is happening in civil aviation at the moment? There's a strong possibility that aviation security will come. So that's why the building is slightly bigger than it needs to be at day one. Perhaps that's something that the airport didn't talk about. And it's actually what's happening within our own city. You know, we've got another, I'm sure we're going to hear about it in a moment from CEDA, about the other big opportunity and actually sector that we support as a city is around logistics, distribution. And the airport is actually a very, very strong third leg in that sector. So it's also a welcoming door to our city, to our community. And that's where I'll come to E. Yes, we're not all landscape designers or roading engineers, but actually go and have a look at some other airports. In fact, look at 85% of them around New Zealand and how you get into them. Ours is very different, along with Christchurch and Palmerston Norths. Now, that's just a side issue, but wouldn't you prefer a landscaped, grassed, paved area into our airport, like Queenstown or like Christchurch, that is really welcoming to a new $40 million plus terminal that's there? Now, if you vote down E, I'm sure the airport are going to get a message that, you know, perhaps having a redundant carriageway there is perhaps not quite the answer that we'd all want, but at least give them some direction on this. I've been in the position where I've pulled up and I've had a staff member that just comes to the door and bangs on the door and says, you can't park here. Well, never parking there, I'm just dropping somebody off in the rain. No, you need to go to the car park. I mean, that's the sort of situation we're dealing with. And the most complaints I get about the airport, I get a lot of good commentary too, guys, so this is not a total complaint, is around the carriageway and how we pull up to our airport, which is significantly different to others. So I'm just asking, and I've asked many times if something can be done about this, and I've got nowhere. So this is I asked officers, how do we do this? And they said, put something in the SOI. Now, it's a pretty crude and rough way of doing it, but actually it does. Who would be against having a beautifully landscaped entrance to your, one of your gateways to your city? So anyway, I hope you can support all of them. Certainly the airport's done a lot of work in trying to think about what else is going to happen bar the terminal, because there's freight, there's warehousing, there's potential medical lifelink opportunities as well. So please keep an open mind around this. We've got a skill-based board that are running this, and we have to trust them on it. Thank you.
Right, thank you everyone. We're going to go through one by one because we've all got different opinions. First off, 2A to start with. We'll vote on that. It has passed 13 votes for and 3 against. Thank you. And we'll go to 2B. To be or not to be? So 2B, we'll vote on that. Fifteen votes to 1. 2C. I'm going a bit too quick, sorry. 2C. Fifteen votes to 1. Two D. Fourteen votes to 2. Right, want to change it? So Rachel's changing her vote. Okay, we're going to the controversial one at the end, which is 2E. Couldn't pick it. 7 votes for and 8 against. There you go. Thank you very much, Airport. Thanks for coming. Oh, hold on. There's only 15 votes. Someone hasn't, we're going to have to vote again. Someone hasn't voted. We'll do it one more time, otherwise we've got to call for a show of hands. Okay, every time put your hand on the finger on the button. Eight all. Okay, it fails for a majority, so it is a fail. Thank you, Airport. Nice to see you. Right, we are moving to the CEDA. CEDA, thank you for waiting for this long time, Jerry. You've been here all day. Page 213 of our agenda. No, it's only 2 o'clock, isn't it? Oh, it's 3. No, just get... Welcome. So we're in your hands, Madam Chair.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the elected members for the opportunity for CEDA to present our half-yearly report for the 24-25 year and our draft 25-26 Statement of Intent. Look, just to recap on our collective vision for the region, which remains firm, and it shows through our pillar projects, Tū Tanganui, the Regional Food Strategy, and the Destination Management Plan, along with a new focus on investment attraction to the Fielding and Palmerston North CBDs. All of our work is getting us towards this vision. CEDA's core areas of focus continue aligned to our economic pillars of business, people and place, underscored by our strategic partnerships and relationships. Our work is informed by a clear intervention logic and the statement of expectations from our shareholders to guide where we spend our time and our energy. New Zealand's economy contracted by 1% over the 6 months to December 24, meaning the country still remains in a technical recession, albeit that it's at the moment. While this presents challenges for businesses and employment, the worst of the downturn may be behind us, with early signs of stabilisation emerging nationally. Manawatu's economy is also showing early signs of recovery, with key industries gaining traction despite national challenges. While economic uncertainty remains, growth in export, tourism and housing points to a more stable outlook for 2025. I'll now pass over to Jerry to provide some highlights from the half-yearly report and outline some key aspects of our 25-26 statement of intent.
Thanks, Bobby. Tēnā koutou, Madam Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today around our performance for the year to date and our 2025-26 statement of intent. I do want to leave a bit of time at the end for questions, so this will be quite brief. So just to let you know that we have this year not offered up a fully designed document, so that we'll do that for our final report for the end of the year, but just wanted to save a little bit of ratepayer money. So just our highlights for the year to date. Oops. So we've so far delivered 11 inward investment activities and opportunities that we've identified against a target of 15 for year end, including ongoing advocacy for Te Utanganui. We heard from the airport earlier, and they're a big strategic player inside Te Utanganui. Opportunities in sustainable processing with a group that's been looking at some biochar activities, green energy and hyper data centres through to rail infrastructure, and trying to work with KeyRail to progress their activities. The second Manawatu Gardens Festival was held with over 20 local gardens contributing, which was more than double compared to the previous year, so that's good growth. Nearly 400 business engagements completed to support business retention and expansion, including 156 small to medium enterprises in the Regional Business Partnership Program, and with a net promoter score of 100 at the time of printing this, on a scale of -100 to 100, so that's really good. The Spratt Agritech 2024 cohort was delivered recently with 13 businesses to support innovation. Near enough to $355,000 worth of Callaghan Innovation Grants were issued, and partnership delivery like with Manawatech for the Summer of Tech recruitment platform for the region, which saw 239 applicants for roles in the IT sector. We also supported the UCOL Careers Expo, the Young Enterprise Scheme, also supporting youth and employment entrepreneurship. 21 media features over that period for the first 6 months of the year that were published in national and global publications, with over 9.2 million views and readers of that material. We delivered 2 marketing campaigns up until Christmas, Kaliu Winter and the Manawatu Gardens Festival. There were about 142,000 website sessions or hits on the Manawatu NZ website. The forecast year-end position is currently around about $97,000 with savings in employment and board costs, and additional government funding supporting operational costs as well. We're continuing to ensure delivery against key programs of work and outcomes as detailed in the current statement of intent, and are planning to offset some of that surplus to contribute to 3 major items of capital expenditure. One is an updated website for Te Utanganui, 2 is replacing our laptops, and thirdly is looking at replacing our Cedar, one of our Cedar vehicles, which hasn't been replaced for over a decade. Now we'll move on to the statement of intent. As always, we've been given clear guidance from our shareholders through the statement of expectations, and we're pleased to now share this with you as our draft, and we're focused on ensuring we deliver on those expectations by the 2 shareholder councils. So key priority projects, and we talked about this a little bit earlier with a comment from the Mayor around Te Utanganui. That still remains our most significant project for the region. The Manawatu Regional Food Strategy is starting to get some traction, and in fact we've just recently been invited to potentially take part in a group that might be going to Europe, funded by the EU, to talk about our food strategy, which is really great. The destination management plan is still important, and the addition of the attracting investment into the Fielding and Palmerston North City centres has been a real fill-up for us, and we're doing a lot of work in that space. I think the appointment of Robbie Woods as the Programme Director for Te Utanganui in the middle of last year or earlier last year has been a real fantastic way of getting Te Utanganui a lot more traction, and in 25-26 we'll continue to drive this project ahead. Following on from a recent refresh of Te Tanganui strategy, which I think we finally signed off on Tuesday, Janet, we're now going to embark on making more of that with a targeted inward investment push for Te Tanganui, along with increased advocacy to central government for support and funding opportunities in that space. We've commissioned an economic impact report with NZIER, which is well underway and should be finished by the end of the financial year, so June, July. That will further support and evidence the regional impact of Te Tanganui. Just some of our other key areas of work: our regional tourism function, our sector development and business support services help to ensure that we're well positioned to respond to emerging and future economic opportunities and challenges. We continue to work to attract new businesses to the region whilst growing existing businesses and retaining them in the region. We also support numerous sectors of strength, including the primary industries and the development of key tourism and visitor products and businesses, and showcasing the region to attract talent, investment and visitors. Just worth noting that coming up in the next month, CEDA is going to be attending Trends, the New Zealand International Tourism Business event, for the first time ever, and I think that acknowledges our growth into more than just a domestic visitor market. Partnerships are really key for us. To do all this mahi, we need to work with our current partners and key stakeholders, both regionally and nationally, whilst also looking to expand on those partnerships and put in MOUs in place where these are useful. We will continue to seek government support across all of our areas of work as well. And finally, just around our performance outcomes, whilst our key areas of focus remain constant, what we deliver inside each focus area changes as we get those projects to a level of maturity. What we're trying to achieve moves forward. We want to also remain agile enough to respond to any changes in economic conditions or extreme events. To that end, we've forecast, or have for the 25-26 financial year, set our key performance indicators to ensure they're concise and measurable, so easy to report to Council. These are focused on investment opportunities, advocacy, supporting our regional strengths, growing and retaining businesses, developing talent pipeline, profiling the region, and partnering with those agencies that support our regional outcomes. We have moved our work on data and insights and profiling the region together, because often these go hand in hand, especially when trying to attract inward investment. The statement of intent provides for CEDA to operate based on a small deficit budget for the coming 3 years to enable us to continue to deliver to the key performance areas that we need to. And CEDA wants to continue to build our relationships with PNCC, working closely to bring the city's ambition to fruition and ensure the region's priority projects are supported. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. I've just got two to start with. The Destination Management Plan, I feel like we've been working on that since I've been in council. What does it look like?
So that's now in, I think, year 2.5 or coming up to year 3 of implementation. So obviously there was a big piece of work done to develop it and then refresh it as a result of COVID. There's, I guess, different streams of work in it. Part of it includes inward investment mahi, which is connected to our hotel attraction work stream. The other bit is working on capability and capacity to increase the amount of products we have. So Jerry mentioned we're going to the Trends trade show for the first time ever. So we've never hit the criteria as a region. We haven't had the right amount of trade-ready products, which is 5. We're now going with 13 businesses this year. So there's been a huge work stream to get, up onto that next step of the ladder, as well as some of the other, I guess, work streams within there is around Te Apari Manawatu Gorge and the opportunities there. We've been working quite heavily with the governance group in that space, as well as then some of the low-hanging fruit identified in terms of key target markets. So you would have seen some of the recent campaigns, which is as a result of the Destination Management Plan in terms of who we're targeting. So I guess it's still visible because it's still very current. I think we need to make sure that we're enhancing this visitor sector without detracting from the, I guess, lifestyle of our communities and residents in the region. So it's not just any growth, it's, value over volume.
Cool. Second question was around the investment in the CBD for Feilding and Palmerston North. What does that strategy look like?
So the strategy in a sense is campaign based. So when we find the opportunity, link the opportunity up with a potential investor or a developer. And just this morning, actually, we've linked a couple of local owners of property with a developer who's keen to come into the region and pick up some inner city development, which we think is really exciting. So we've got those sort of projects going on both in the city and the district. In fact, there's one in the district that just started last week. So there's lots of those things going on in terms of what that looks like. And what's been really good for us, and I think I might have mentioned this at the last or the one before Economic Development Committee, is we take leads from everywhere. So we've had some really good relationships with Matthew at Palmy Bid, who's linked us up with some of the contacts he has in the city.
So is CEDA like a connector in this
Yes,
relationship?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's really good about that is then he passes the inward investment opportunity to us, and then we pick it and run with it, which is really cool. In our CRM, when we look at all of our inward investment, we actually tag where the lead came from, so that we can actually say at any point in time that, I don't know, 5% came from, I don't know, BID, 20% came from CEDA Direct, 50% came from wherever, so it's really, really good that we can do that.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I get to my actual question, Janet, I just wanted to ask you to say some more about that huge increase to get you onto the trends table. What kind of products are you taking trends?
So we've got a mix of some brand new products, so our new luxury lodge, Kaitahi in Palmerston North, and then some other ones that have managed to, I guess, make the changes within their business and increasing their capability. So Huanui is now officially trade ready and qual marked as well. And then we have Rathmoy and I think a few new farm stays who also do a separate farm tour package, so Grassmere Estate and Romney Lane Homestead. So a lot of, I guess, boutique bespoke experiences, but that's right up the right market. So for trends, we will be speed dating 60 buyers, and we pick them out of a pool of 350. So we choose to match with them, and it's a bit like Tinder. They have to choose to match with us as well.
I'll take your word for that, Janet.
So yeah, we make sure that, you know, what our product is matches their market and clientele. So there's been a big amount of mahi from the team in getting the region, those businesses ready. We've done a series of trade ready workshops, capability programs. So it's very exciting.
It's really excellent, thank you. My actual question was, I suppose the contrast I read between the council's statement of expectation and the statement of intent, where I felt there was probably a tension maybe between the key strengths that you focus on and work to deliver, and then there was a comment in the statement of expectation about expecting you to scan for new opportunities regardless of whether they aligned with key strengths. Now respond to new opportunities I could get to, but actively scanning for those randoms, how does that tension play out?
Oh, it's a very healthy tension.
Of course.
No, look, we do it in all sorts of ways. So I'll give you an example. I have to be careful I don't step on any sort of confidentiality stuff, but about 2 weeks ago, an opportunity popped up on my LinkedIn feed. So I emailed this person. It was a scan in an area that we don't necessarily look at. What that's turned into is potential for a significant change in the way that some of the farmers out in the district and the city, in fact, might grow their crops to feed a process that needs a huge demand in this sort of field, and that might turn into this company investing, who's currently an Australian-based company, coming into New Zealand with a product that's already approved for sale in New Zealand, but they don't have a production plant. And all of a sudden, you know, I would imagine that that's probably a facility that could be based either in Te Utanganui inside the Northeast Industrial Zone or Te Utanganui over at Kawakawa Road, but would bring a new venture to the table. So we're always out there looking for new opportunities. One of the things we're really careful about, though, is there is that tension around we don't want to do what we talk about quite a bit, which is bark at every passing car, because then you lose the focus on the thing that really matters. If I could just slip in a soapbox bit here, that Te Utanganui and the progress we're making is absolutely fantastic. And it's just a coiled spring waiting to launch. And whatever we can do around both of our council tables to keep that project moving ahead in terms of what it's going to bring in terms of economic and social good is just unbelievable. So I think we still want to make sure we focus on the key game.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair.
Amir.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, people, for the report and the SOI. SOI. Look, just around the Gardens Festival, great that it linked in with the Rhododendron show, was it, up at Kimbolton? How many people, I mean, there's lots of good numbers there, but how many people sort of went on that? Do we know?
I'd have to get back to you, I don't have the numbers to hand. We did measure through surveys, but what we're doing for this year, which is the third year running, as part of, I guess, the cluster development, is looking at a full ticketed system across the whole festival. So it's sort of, there's a mix of public and private gardens, so not all of them have fees, so that measurement was a challenge. And because the idea, this is part of, I guess, our cluster development, we will succession plan it out to a separate owner. You know, we're not running events for the sake of running events, but we need to make sure we've got some better measures in place. I guess there's mainly anecdotal feedback.
So we're talking 1,000 plus rather than tens and hundreds?
I think it was definitely in the high, above 500, but I think 60% were from out of town as well.
Yep.
So we did have really good stats on that.
Good, excellent. And commissionable, I mean, it's great that you've got that sort of lodge and sort of glamping sort of farm stay type stuff. But commissionable product, still a challenge, is it, for us?
It is, but more so with the smaller price point operators, museums in particular. You know, it's not very appealing to put a 20% commission on $12.50 entry. It's not worth the time. So what we do is sort of wrap it in terms of the supporting experiences to those that it fits. But we've actually had a huge increase of new product hitting market. Obviously the demand is there. So the two, Grasmere Estate, Romney Lane, Kaitahi, and they're already seeing huge numbers of international visitors.
But accommodation of other things.
So Romney Lane and Grasmere both offer separate farm bespoke. So we've got everything from sheep and beef, dairy with Stewart Dairylands and Romney, as well as arable. So it's really bringing out into the agritourism experience and linking back into then the food connections in the city, which Kaitahi Lodge are now connected as part of our new visitor collective HUIs that we have every quarter with about 20-30 of those operators. They're all working together now to captivate those visitors so they're in region for longer or know that they need to come back to do X, Y and Z next time. So I think things are really humming quite nicely in that space.
And what about Māori offerings, heritage offerings? Is there traction happening there?
So we do work a little bit with the conference and business team within PNCC as well on this. What we have currently is free or ad hoc. It's a hard one because there's not enough demand to run something on a set amount of times and days, but because of where we're entering the international market, we are working with those bespoke customised tours and small FIT, like independent groups. So they're more willing to get in touch and pre-plan something. They don't need to know that there's a 4-day-a-week schedule.
So it's more appointment-based rather than the doors open and you hope somebody turns up.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's a right fit for our region at the moment, and we've got some amazing assets in play as well to support that. So yeah, the conversation's still ongoing, particularly in Rangitāne with our contacts as part of that tourism kaupapa.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett. Sorry, I had trouble.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sita, for the report and statement of intent. I was just interested in page 5 of the statement of intent around the monitoring indicators. Great to see those come closer to the front. In there you talk about reporting on total GDP, GDP per capita, etc. How well placed would Sita be to report on GDP per emissions?
I don't know, to be honest. Was that with, did you say with respect to emissions?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we are well positioned to do that, actually.
Could I ask officers if there might be an opportunity there?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We can certainly connect our climate change team, our city economist, with CEDA to look at how that can be done. My understanding is if there's GDP data and there's city emissions data, then there should be the ability to do that. However, I can't comment on behalf of what data is available on emissions at MDC.
Great, thank you. Having heard that, I guess, would there be interest in exploring that for future reporting cycles?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the moment we report what's asked of us in the statement of expectation, but we can certainly look at broadening that. Absolutely, yeah.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There's no further questions, so thank you very much. I'd like to look to move the recommendations, and seconded by Councillor Wood. So just moving to comment. First off, I just want to say well done on the statements that you put forward. I think the major projects that you are going to be delivering on, Te Tanganui, the Destination Management Plan, as I've seen that plan many times, and it's great to finally see that we're getting implementation done on that plan, because it has felt like it's been going round and round, but it's good to actually finally see we're actually getting something coming out the other end of it. And it's exciting to see the investment strategy on buildings that are in the CBD, because we do have a lot of vacant buildings, so it's great to see a strategy worked on that for us and for Fielding. So that's really good to see something being worked on in that area. So well done there. I'll go to other comments. We've got the Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, thanks to the team at CEDA. We're making some real progress, and I look back on years past where there was all sorts of different discussions going on in the space, and we just seem to be, in quite difficult economic times actually, being quite focused on where we're going. I just acknowledge the work being done in that, I suppose, that visitor market, which has always been not well understood by even us at times. You know, the visitor numbers that come here and the amount of bed nights and associated economic activity is quite huge. I mean, it's more than all of Taranaki, Marlborough, Coromandel, some other parts where we do bat but way above our weight. But can I just, the stuff around these lodges and the farm stays, that agri farm visitor market, I think is actually our sweet spot. That's what we do really, really well. The other thing we do well is gardens, and I'm quite interested in that. I look at the Taranaki and our Taranaki cousins up the road. They do gardens very well too. Quite mature, and their garden will attract thousands and thousands of people. And I've been to it myself once, got dragged along, but it was very good. And I just wonder if we've got an opportunity to do that. You know, we had Stuff come to us a few years ago, and we did their garden festival, and they told me they thought that we were going to be a real weak link, and we outsold Queenstown. So it just shows you that sometimes we are a little bit of a hidden gem. Also the commissionable products, and I think as we grow a little bit more mature in that market, encouraging some of our museums and other entities to have a look at what they can do that is commissionable. Look, we've got a very, very good offering for families, and a lot of things are free here, but actually there is an opportunity to charge for some things, and I think we should be open to that. I can remember the days of the residence card. Can you remember the residence card? That was actually gaining a bit of traction, and it was just unfortunate in the makeup of CEDA that got ditched, because I think now it would be starting to hit its straps. But anyway, well done, really, and look, Te Tanganui, as you said, focused around CBD, retaining our own businesses in quite a difficult climate. It's really, really good, so well done. Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I too want to acknowledge CEDA, ngā mihi ki a koutou. You know, whenever we go to events around the city, within the region as well, CEDA is always there and playing a prominent role in terms of promoting our region, our city. I wanted to acknowledge you particularly because as I read this, as a teacher of Te Reo Māori, I was like, wow, I love it. You're giving visibility and prominence. I mean, the whakatauki, Toitu, Te Whenua Whatu Ngaro Te Tangata, profile the region to attract people, business and investment. Te Māori o Manawatu, profile Manawatu, locally, nationally and globally. I think that that prominence and the usage of Te Reo Māori infused in there is very unique, and also helps us assist more people realising how special Te Reo Māori is, and I thank you. Kia ora.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you for building that anticipation for my words of wisdom. Yeah, I just wanted to echo the thanks to CEDA for the work that you do and the visibility that you increasingly have in our sector. I think those of us who've been around this conversation for a while will know that over the years there's been a fair amount of commentary about who are CEDA and what exactly do they do and what benefit do businesses get from it. And I think you're answering all of those questions in spades at the moment. So really great to read your report, which 31st December last year feels like a long time ago now, but casting our minds back, some excellent work in that space and looking forward to a really good 25-26 with the direction you're projecting. And just huge congratulations on that trends positioning. I think you've absolutely hit a sweet spot there. That's a big uptick in performance to go from not having anything to take to having loads. So good luck with the Tinder speed dating, Janet.
Right, everyone, we're going to put them all together and vote. Thank you. Right, that's passed, 16 votes for, none against. Just straight this afternoon tea break now. We'll be back in the room at 22. Just so everyone knows the order. Thank you very much, CEDA. The order is we're going to go number 8, parking, then number 10, the city transformation. Is that the right one? Is that the right one? Yep. And then we're going to go to number 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Then we're done. No today. Okay? Then we'll finish. We'll be done. What's the time? So we're on item number 8. Page 95. James, I'll get you to get started on it, please.
James, good afternoon. James McGall, Senior Transport Planner. So this paper is looking at options around progressing the parking framework, which is included as attachment 1. The parking framework, the intention of that document is to help council with its decision making when it comes to parking management and link those decision making back to wider council objectives around the transport network and the city. I'll note it is a part of the PNITI program and is seen as one of the earlier interventions for council to enact. Lastly, I'd just like to note that when we consult, the recommendation is to consult on the parking framework. While we'll consult on the whole document, there's some key areas we want to look at and get some feedback on. Those are the objectives and the principles, the direction setting for how we prioritise parking around residential streets with high demand and commercial areas. And then lastly, we want to get feedback on the scope of the parking management plans to make sure that we've got the geographic scope of those plans correct. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Hold on a minute. Okay, we'll go to questions. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, James. My read of the penalty option paper is that the identified action was for a parking management review only, and there doesn't appear to be a mention of a requirement for a framework to be developed or adopted. Is that your understanding?
Shall I get...
Through you, Madam Chair, I can't quite recall the exact detail of the penalty document. I think it's 300 or 400 pages. What I can say is the parking framework has been signalled in the relevant plan adopted as part of the LTP and various work schedules. What I would say as well is there's no legal requirement to have a parking framework. There's nothing that explicitly says the council must have one. It was seen, yeah.
Thank you. And is there any reason why a case-by-case decision-making such as we've been doing couldn't be fully aligned to the strategic direction in the absence of a framework?
No, there isn't reason. Sorry. Doing case-by-case ad hoc kind of decisions or as on needs basis decisions can still be aligned with strategic goals. It just, I guess, where the framework would support with that is that you've got your, I guess, intention up front and it's clearer to the community if there's contention between how parking is managed in a particular space. So take the hospital, for instance. The parking framework would help you to indicate where you would prioritise the parking management and what kind of resolutions you would take. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. And so just thinking in terms of that cohesion.
Just think that David wants to answer.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to continually be jumping in, but I guess what I would say is, parking historically is a very vexed issue. History suggests that, without some sort of strategic direction, we will potentially continue to slip into ad hoc decision making. So that's appreciate there's pros and cons to, how directive or undirective we want to be though.
Thank you. So, yeah, just in terms of the historic vexedness of it and also in terms of that cohesion and integration, is there any reason why parking isn't covered in our strategic networks plan and why that's differentiated or excluded?
So the focus of the strategic networks plan was a bit more on the flows rather than, I guess, the parking side of it. So where do we want to prioritise heavy vehicle movements? Where do we want to prioritise public transport, those kind of things is more the focus of the strategic networks document.
And so a parking management framework and then by extension parking management plans are looking more at the storage of the vehicles when they're not in flow, so they're separate from the traffic picture as a whole.
So yes, it's a little hard because I wasn't involved in the development of that document. But my understanding is the focus was a lot more on the movement rather than, as you said, the storage or the garaging of vehicles, whether for work or personal, like private residential use.
Okay. Thank you, that's all from me. Thanks, Madam.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, James. Just so we've had some community input already into what's in front of us today.
So there was a couple rounds of targeted stakeholder engagement. One done by my predecessor, I think back in a few years ago, and then one more recently in 2023 by myself. So that was just initial feedback into the development of the document.
Great, thanks. So given where it's at now, could we simply take the approach of adopting it as the parking framework and actually get into the more detailed consultation with the actual parking management plans rather than kind of doing a double up thing here?
I might refer this one to David. I'll just note before he speaks that one of the things we did want to get out of this process was confirmation around the geographic scope of the parking management plans. So.
Through you, Madam Chair, the short answer is yes. I think you can adopt this document without public consultation. Just to provide some, I guess, context to that advice. I think there's a very small risk that someone may say that there should have been public consultation. I think the likelihood of anyone taking any legal action against a process like this, I think, is incredibly low. I think the risk is more maybe one at the political or community risk around, why weren't we consulted? But I think that is mitigated by the fact that there has already been some pre-engagement, as James explained. It's also mitigated by the fact that there are a number of higher order documents that this council's already approved regarding transport, and this document feeds off those. And it's also mitigated by the fact that a number of the actions will involve working directly with stakeholders developing the parking management plan. So I think from time to time elected members should feel confident adopting a document such as this without public consultation, except it's not an explicit option in the report, but having a look at some of the resolutions coming through and where council's thinking is that, I think you should have confidence of approving this without consultation.
Thanks. So just a couple things in around geographic scope. Presumably geographic scope could be addressed through a parking management plan consultation where we would confirm the scope there rather than trying to pre-confirm geographic scope at this stage before we actually got into the detail?
Ideally, you do it before you start the project because you want to know what areas you're looking at, but you could do that as part of, I guess, when you do a parking management plan, you kind of break it down into two stages. The first stage is basically your information gathering. So you want to know kind of what data do we have about parking use, what kind of issues are we encountering. So I guess through that stage, you could establish the scope of how far you might limit the parking management plan.
Great, thank you for that context. Madam Chair, would just indicate that I'd be happy to move what we have on the screen with an amendment to remove the requirement for public consultation.
No, nothing's been moved. Okay, yep, fine. Thank you for that. Right, okay. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just in terms of the consultation process that's described on page 101, it talks about consultation in May. If consultation happened in May, when would we be considering the feedback and making any decision from that? What would the timing of that be?
I might, I don't think I can answer that question at this time because we would need to work with governance to find a time and understand what kind of process we would need, whether it's a hearing process, I guess similar to what we did with the bus shelters, where we heard submitters as part of the committee, or whether it needs to be its own separate process. Otherwise, I think David has a comment.
Yeah, I think it would be potentially quite tight, but I think if we did the traditional full consultation with submissions and a hearing, we could get that through prior to the election.
Like June?
No, there's I mean, there may need to be an option to use committees outside of the economic growth, but there's committee meetings, council meetings right up to October, as I understand it.
Oh, okay. So is this sort of decision appropriate to make during the pre-election period?
Yes, I think this is the sort of decision the council can continue to make up till the election.
Yeah, okay. Just in terms of looking at the framework and then looking at the parking management plan, if we didn't want to consult on both, which would be the more appropriate one to consult on if we only wanted to consult once?
I guess noting that this process doesn't require a formal consultation process similar to like our the LTP or annual plan process. I guess the guidance from NZTA does actually recommend that you engage with your community at both stages with the park framework or strategy, as some councils have called it, and then again with the parking management plan.
Sorry, if I could just add to that, I think what we tend to see with parking issues is people, stakeholders, business owners, residents are particularly interested in the parking that is, that they tend to take a localised view rather than necessarily a citywide view. A number do. So I think if you were choosing between sort of a consultation engagement process on the framework versus the management plans, there would be some benefit to focusing that on the management plans if you were only wanting to do it once, because it would be a more focused engagement about the issues that are of particular interest to, as I said, business, residents, stakeholders.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now look to move to the recommendations. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two alternate recommendations, seconded by Councillor Zabel, that I'd like to move. Thank you, colleagues. You'll notice the recommendation to not approve the document for consultation was removed, because by default, if you don't move that we approve it for consultation, then it's not done. So it was a redundant additional. I'll talk first to the question of whether or not we should simply adopt this framework without consultation, whether we should go directly to the parking management plans for consultation. The concern that I have with this document, as we've gone through the workshop and through the process with officers, is that the comment has been made a number of times from our team. The parking framework does not predetermine any actions on any individual street. And what we know from experience with consultation is consultation with context is far more valuable to those in our community experiencing it. Take, for example, the parking hierarchy for residential zones. What does that mean for somebody who lives on here, who perhaps is worried about the number of hospital workers who park outside their property and make a submission to the framework saying, we'd like a P60 zone? Well, the response they'd get is, we're not determining that as part of the parking framework. That would be determined and developed as part of the parking management plan. What does it mean for a business on Broadway who wants more parking supply and made a submission on that as part of the consultation to the framework? Well, they'll be told we don't predetermine any of those results, and that'll be done as we go into the parking management plan. Or a developer on St John's Ave looking at building a new set of houses who's not sure what parking on that residential street's going to look like, who wants to make a submission to the parking framework. Well, they would be told that's something that we'll deal with and determine as part of the parking management plans. And so going through this process, the alternate I put up last year, was it last year? I think it was, looked at giving some certainty through the framework as to what sort of decisions we would make. And the advice from officers was that wasn't appropriate. This needs to be a high-level framework. And so given that the framework now is very basic in that it talks about some hierarchies and some policies. In conversation with Councillor Bell and a number of my colleagues, the discussion was perhaps we take that hierarchy, we take those policies, we put them into a parking management plan and then show the community what that looks like in practice on your street, outside your house or outside your business. And then if you have an issue with it or you want to see something different, you can impact not just what happens outside your door, but if that requires a change in the hierarchy, you could do it then. Because the concern I have is a citizen looking at this document who says to me, William, what does this mean for me at my business on Broadway? I can't hand on heart tell them that I know. I'd ask my colleagues around the table, could you? Until we see a parking management plan developed, that's where we would see what the impact would be. So I think potentially we hamstring ourselves by either approving with or without consultation this framework prior to seeing what the implementation of it looks like, and that somebody might make a submission that's very sensible that we around the table agree with, but the advice will then be, no, we locked that in when we locked in the hierarchies as part of the parking framework. So it's a very fair question to ask, should we just adopt this without consultation and then get on with the work? My preference would be that we don't adopt it today, but we utilise the work that's been done to build good quality parking management plans that we can then have a genuine conversation with our community on without risking consultation fatigue, which even trying to shove this in before the election, I suspect we would be getting pretty close to. But if we tell people who come and make a submission, actually the practical thing you're talking about isn't something we're going to consult on for another 12 months, I think we don't do ourselves a good service. So I appreciate there's going to be debate on this, but I thought I'd put up an alternative way of looking at it so that we could then consider, and Councillor Bellon's going to talk more to the need, whether we do or don't need a parking framework and what this could look like. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I agree with Councillors Bellon and Councillor Wood. There is over-consultation and there will be some fatigue here for sure. And I think there is a duty on this council to put this to bed. Look, one size does not fit all, and this is where I really disagree with the GM and the officers. There is nothing wrong with a localised view. Absolutely there isn't. And I actually really take exception to it. People in Tainui Street, Cuba Street Quadrant, to Ada Street residential area, to the hospital area, to the central city are all different. And if you enforce one size fits all, which has been attempted in the past, it'll end in tears. So I do like the idea of taking the work that's been done, or some of it, perhaps not all of it, but some of it, and a great majority of it to be fair, and then beginning that development of the actual management plans. And actually, I think there's been a clear direction. This is a light touch. We're not starting again, and I know some people in the room and the officers may disagree with me, but actually our city is different to some other cities where it's just straight out central business district, all in there. We actually have a whole lot of other areas like Andrew Young Street, Cuba Street, that feed in light business and that to the services businesses to the city. You will strip it out overnight and devalue the city if we do some stupid stuff with parking. So I favour, and we should learn from the last time we tried this with the 9 o'clock parking. You know, I think it was 99% against what the officer recommendations were. So please, if we can just have a level head around this, I'm just asking what is really broken, other than the issues, my understanding of the issues around time limits, and some of those will differ, as I said, from the city, central city area to the hospital area, to Andrew Young, Tainui Street, etc. So one size does not fit all, and I think we'll learn that through consultation and the submissions. So please support 1 and 2. Thank you.
Okay, the General Manager just wants to comment.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Look, I apologise if I wasn't clear. I think the advice was that if you're only going to engage a consultant, you're best to do it at the parking management plan level, because we said, my advice was that was where you will get the localised feedback from the residents, businesses or stakeholders. So I apologise if I wasn't clear, but the advice is there is no need to consult on this if you don't want to. If you're looking to engage or consult once, then parking management plans at the local level is the best way to do that. So I apologise if that wasn't clear, but that was, yeah.
Councillor Johnson.
I won't be supporting these alternative recommendations. I'm a little bit perplexed actually at the flip-flop that we're getting. We had a whole set of amendments proposed by the very councillor who's now proposing that we don't progress the draft parking framework. So I can't quite follow the logic here. It does seem to be, to me, a little bit of, well, if you won't play with me, I'll take my ball home. As far as I'm concerned, we should take every opportunity to consult about parking. I think we learned our lesson when we changed the parking times without consultation. And I would much prefer that we go out and consult on the parking framework, which in the hierarchy of planning instruments provides a general guideline to the sorts of things that we would be considering. There's no harm then in subsequently consulting locally in the hospital area or in another Ada Street area or wherever about specific local plans. I think that people would much rather have the opportunity to have their say twice than not at all. And the risk of not consulting on this one is, if we just adopt this without going out to consult on it, and subsequently when we go out with the parking management plans, we get submissions from people that are totally in opposition to the hierarchy that we've created, we're going to put ourselves in a difficult position. Why not go out and consult on this framework? There's nothing in it that's, I don't think, at all likely to scare the horses. But if there is, then we'll hear it. And then subsequently, we can work with local communities to develop locally oriented plans. So I don't quite understand why we would not just accept this and move forward. It's taken long enough to get to this point. We've had at least 2 workshops. It's been back and forth amongst committees. And I think it would be much better to just go out and consult on it at this point. Hear from people and then subsequently work on the parking management plans. I don't know if people are just afraid of doing this because it's an election year or what it is. I can't understand the logic of what's been proposed here. So I would encourage you to vote against these, and if they fail, I'll put the original recommendation up. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting these recommendations. I appreciate the perspective that Councillor Wood and Councillor Zabellan have put into this. And I guess in reading the officer's report, an option 2 is there not to approve the draft parking draft parking framework for public consultation. The benefit of that's outlined is consultation fatigue is avoided. And I do think that's a very real issue for us to consider at this time when we're in the middle of Local Water Done Well, annual budget, engaging with our community on some really important issues. It's not that I don't want to talk to our community about this, but I feel that there is an unnecessary level of layers to this that just makes it more complicated for our community. If we go and talk to them about our framework and then we get feedback from them and then we want to talk to them about a management plan, they'll just look at us and go, well, didn't you already ask us that question last time? People don't differentiate so specifically between the strategic overview as the actual nuts and bolts of what it looks like in practice. In my view, a parking management plan, there's no reason why a strategic view can't be incorporated into that. To have one document that we consult on once, that makes a whole lot more sense. I think too often, whether it be the community gardens or other things, too often we put in far too many steps in the process, far too many layers. Let's keep this simple for our community. So I will be supporting these recommendations.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you, everyone, for your comments. I think for me, rather than flip-flopping, I've been working my way through an issue that I've not known much about and finding my way to a view in the wider context of transport and our strategic direction as a whole. And it would have been great if I could have arrived at my view earlier, but upskilling takes time and it has been a linear journey for me. I don't support going up for consultation at this stage because I do agree with Councillor Naylor that we're adding more layers of paperwork than is required. Rather, I think that we should be seeking to integrate the key concepts and principles that we've arrived at into the wider strategic network plan and the network operating plan, with the parking management plan forming sections of those documents. To me, that ensures that we've properly integrated the set of parking management principles and they're fully contained within the context of the whole transport network. And that also means that the full network plan, including parking, would be regularly reviewed as a whole view, which I think achieves more cohesion and integration than it might otherwise. I think parking is a key component of the transport picture because the availability of it or the lack of it does impact how people move through the roading network. It's also just unbelievable to me that this council could have provided car parking in the city for nearly 100 years, you know, through the most enormous period of transport mode change in history, to kind of be told in 2021 by NZTA that we need to review how we do it, and then to spend this time carefully working through these issues, but just to arrive at a point where we're saying we're striving for balance. I think we might be expecting more cars, but we're hardly expecting that kind of mode shift or behaviour change that the city has had to accommodate in the past, when we've gone from horse and cart and trains in the CBD into private vehicle ownership. So short of getting flying cars, we're not expecting radical change, we're just expecting volumetric change. So I think that we are better off developing a parking management plan, STAT, and incorporating the key principles that we've arrived at as an introductory section and then consulting on those together. We certainly shouldn't consult on parking twice. That way we don't lose the good work that has been done, but we get a more targeted consultation proposition, and I think we'll get better feedback that we can work with about whether we're making the right decisions with our principles in the first place, and that interest that is going to draw people out and making them want to consult, to contribute to our consultation, is that interest of what's happening outside my business and what's happening outside my house. And that's going to link them to the principles, I think, and with greater effectiveness than just going out with principles in an abstract sense. So, yeah, please support. Thanks.
Finally, Hancock.
Madam Chair, I really disagree with a lot of things that everybody's said. But I think the parking framework, Councillor Wood should be very, very pleased with that framework which has been developed, because it actually includes an awful lot of the things that he said he needed in his own draft framework that he put together. This is about developing a framework, and I think if we go down this path here, we ignore the need for a framework which provides consistency around the parameters and themes that would then inform the parking plans, right, which are locally based. So I'm with Councillor Barrett. I think, and David has made the point that we don't actually have to go and consult on the framework. We could actually just adopt the framework and then go out and consult on the parking management plans in the future. That's the logical way to deal with this, rather than getting ahead of ourselves, going down this path, and then not having a framework which is actually going to ensure that consistency in terms of themes and parameters which should guide the planning process. So that's the way I see it. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. So is there anything on the screen in front of us that precludes also adopting the framework at this point? So in that case, I would like to move that we do adopt the framework. And seconded by Councillor Hancock as an additional recommendation.
Sure, number 3. Thanks, Councillor. Just wait a minute, she's going to write it up. So we'll vote on these ones first and then we'll write that one up. So that's what we're going to do, everyone. We're going to vote on these two first, and then she's going to, you want to write a reply? Quickly. We've got to get through a few items, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's a few, thank you colleagues from this session, and Hancock, pleased that you're pleased that I'm pleased. But what I would say, because Councillor Johnson has besmirched my character suggesting this is a flip-flop, so I thought I'd just explain it very simply, is my change in understanding of what the purpose of the parking framework was borne out through the workshop. So my alternative framework had a few things in there. One was it set out a direction that we increase the availability and supply of parking as we go and turn into a growing city. The advice from officers was that's predetermining an outcome. That can't be a part of a parking framework. That's dealt with at the local level in the parking plans. My alternative framework talked about when we make changes to a street, we mitigate parking loss as we go through it. And the advice from officers was that's predetermining an outcome and that cannot be part of the framework. That's dealt with at the parking management plan level. So I don't suggest this is a flip-flop, I suggest this is a change in understanding of what the purpose of that framework is. And in light of the change of that purpose, I think the hierarchy and principles together with how that works in your local area will be easier for our community to understand. We'll get better feedback from our community, and it maintains the work that we've done. There's already 2 separate hierarchies in here, one for in the inner city and one for in the residential areas. So it makes sense we take those hierarchies and put them into the local parking management plan that we then deal with it at that stage. The concern I have with Councillor Barrett and Councillor Hancock's recommendation is that if we don't adopt this for consultation, we tell people at the parking management plan level, sorry, we've already made that decision, that's the hierarchy, this is how it looks on your street, that's already been dealt with. So I think it's better we include that hierarchy and principles at the point of consultation with the communities. That mitigates that risk of that malalignment that Councillor Johnson was worried about. So let's vote for 1 and 2, and in my opinion, don't vote for number 3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, let's now vote. We'll separate. We'll vote for 1 and 2 together, and we'll vote for number 3 separately. Thank you. It's passed with 11 votes for and 3 against. Right. Now we'll go to number, I don't know what number it was, number 3. That the council adopt the parking framework, attachment 1 with Councillor Barrett and Councillor Hancock. If you could please vote for that one. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barrett, don't vote. He's going to speak to it. Sorry, I didn't actually see you on the queue. That's my fault.
Not to prolong things too long, but just to briefly introduce my rationale here. Currently then what we have is a draft that's kind of sitting there without status. It's had some bits lifted out of it and put into the fast lane, and the rest of it's just kind of sitting there. My view is that it's something that we have invested in a fair bit as elected members. It's something that the community's already started to invest in through the targeted consultation that happened, and I think it's well worth ourselves just backing ourselves basically at this point and saying this is a starting point. It doesn't mean that it's chiseled into stone. If something comes back through consultation on a parking management plan per se, we can subsequently amend this. It is something that we can work with. I just think that given the amount of effort that we've put in collectively to get to this point, kind of abandoning it doesn't really make sense. So would encourage you to support it so that we have a firm starting point for that discussion with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Let's now vote. That's 4 votes for and 10 against. Thank you. Right, that's that finished. We'll now see you later, Councillor Finlay. Okay, we're going to move to item number 10. Thank you, James. Page 131. Page 131.
So I will take this report as read, but I will just highlight one thing. So in section 3.5, we mentioned the most recent workshop, which was on the 20th of Feb 2025 for the City Centre Indicative Business Case. Subsequently, following the drafting of this paper, we have scheduled a follow-up workshop with the steering group and stakeholders involved, and that's to occur on the 15th of May. In addition, because we are getting close to the end of the City Centre Indicative Business Case project, we've scheduled a briefing for elected members on the 7th of May to go through the process that the steering group and stakeholders have been involved. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Just in 4.2 on page 133, talks about that there's no funding for progressing this and that the steering group will finish. Or that the work will be paused, and then it says with the steering group that it would be reconvened in 2026. When is the next budget included in the long-term plan for this program?
So I'll let Glenn answer the question around the budget. I can talk to the committee around there, noting that the steering group's currently working.
Did you? Okay, Karen.
The steering group is still continuing to be involved in the city centre indicative business case process. There's no intention for that group to reconvene before the local election, and so that was indicating that we'd look to try and reconfirm the membership and get that group back together in 2026 to talk about, I guess, the outcome of the city centre business case, because there's that process will help potential options around co-funding from NZTA for the program.
So when is the next budget included for this program in the LTP? Which year?
We'll have to answer that by separate cover. We'll respond to that question by email.
The
Okay,
General
through you.
Manager
can't
was
recall.
want to.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could just assist. Funnily enough, I was having a look at this just the other day, actually, because the Safari Group were asking questions about the timing of the streetscape program. So there's some design work in year 4, and the money starts again in year 5 of the LTP.
So what's the reason for presuming that we would reconvene the group in 2026 if our current LTP hasn't got funding in years 1, 2 and 3?
That was basically the thought process was to get the group back together to think about the outcome of the city centre indicative business case and start to have discussions about what areas we would like to progress with in terms of the program prior to the program funding. So confirming that, I guess noting that it's a large area that's being covered, what area do we focus on first?
It's for funding that's in year 4. So they'll be convening to talk about how to spend the funding in year 4 of the LTP. Is that what you're saying?
I guess through you, Madam Chair, that the city centre business case deals with more than just the streetscape works. So the city centre business case also covers the high level initial planning for instance, an upgraded bus terminal. While the funding environment is not supportive of that at the moment, it's been a long-held ambition for the city. The business case is starting to explore options. They may well involve advocacy, working with landowners. I think with big projects like that, the idea that we're continuing to plan and think about positioning ourselves for co-investment when that is available is a good thing to be doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. So I'll move the recommendations, seconded by Councillor Wood. And I don't have any comments to make. Councillor Naylor?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just be real quick, and I guess I alluded to this through my questions, but I mean, I think the direction through the long-term plan has been really clear on this, that we're pausing the investment in this. My concern is that sometimes there's a lot of resource and time and effort that goes into the planning of projects that may or may not eventuate, and I feel a bit cautious or a bit hesitant about the intent to reconvene the group in 2026 when funding is not in there till year 4, whilst the idea I know might still be alive in some people's minds and they want things to happen, but I think the decisions around the funding in the LTP do need to follow through on perhaps things being put to bed when they should, and not necessarily trying to keep a dead horse alive for too long.
Thanks very much for your comments. I just want to respond to that though. This project is really important for development. The Safari Group, like they won't develop in the city centre if they don't know that we're going to be putting money into our city centre development. So we have to be looking like we are going to tidy up our own backyard so that they will put development into the city centre. So that's why we have to be keeping a project group going. Otherwise, they won't be putting their own money into it. That's what it's all about. That's what development's about. That's what economic development's about. We all know that's 101. Okay, we're all getting tired. We've already moved these recommendations. If there's no further comments, we'll like to vote on this recommendation. That's passed with 12 votes for and 1 against. We'll now move to item number 15. James, you're back again. It's page 239. Sorry, 293. The numbers around the wrong way.
So this paper before you today is, the purpose is to introduce the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road indicative business case and to provide a bit of an overview of the project as well as the process behind it. I'll try to keep this brief. I'll refer to so I talk a bit about the business case process. Business cases are really important for any local authority when they want to seek co-funding for significant transport projects. In the case of the Freight Ring Road, the stage we are at is the indicative business case, which is the early kind of business case stage in the process. And so in 3.3, I highlight that the most important parts of this process is what we call the strategic case. So that's your reason for the investment or the reason for the change. And then your economic case, which is where you identify the options. In terms of the Freight Ring Road, a key part of the indicative business case will be confirming the route of the Freight Ring Road, building on the work done in the Paniti program. Final comments, I'll just note that Section 5 around the partner and stakeholder engagement, that's just initial thinking, it's not an exhaustive list. And then lastly, we are currently out to tender to find a consultant to undertake this work. That's expected to be finished around June 2025 with work commencing 1 July this year, and noting that we've planned for an 18-month timeline for this project just because of the budgets. Happy for questions.
Thanks, James. I'm waiting to see if anyone's coming into the queue. Waiting. No, no one's going to ask you a question. Thank you, James. You got off lightly. So I'll look to move this recommendation, seconded by Councillor Wood, that the committee receive the memorandum entitled Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road Update presented to the Economic Growth Committee today. And I just want to thank you for this. It's a great report, gives us a good, clear picture of where you're up to. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. No one else is going to comment, so we'll look to vote. Thanks, everyone. It's passed with 13 votes for and none against. Thank you. Stacey, you're up. You've waited all day. Page 303. We've got 2 more items to go.
Right, kia ora tātou, Stacey Andrews, City Economist. Yes, this has been an interesting time and a very interesting time to be writing an economic report 2 weeks prior to the date when you're presenting it. So I almost would like to say ignore about half of the report. I'm going to skip through the things that happened toward the end of last year and earlier this year and then focus on more detail around the tariffs and what potentially it means for the New Zealand economy and the city. Obviously, at the time when this report was read, there was no detail around that. So now we have a little bit more detail, but things are still pretty uncertain. Okay, so
Stacey, I'll just give you a heads up. Everyone's pretty tired, so we might want to move things quite quickly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely happy to do that. So actually at the end of last year and earlier this year, the New Zealand economy was really showing signs of improvement. We were seeing that a little bit of an uptick in spending, not much, but just the beginning, and our rural sector was doing incredibly well, which meant that basically the city as a city surrounded by a strong rural economy actually did better than the New Zealand economy. So there's a whole lot of information up there. I'll just skip through the important parts. In our community at the moment, we're seeing the rough end of the recession, so there's still a lot of pain out there, and we're seeing that across our communities, even though we're starting to see an uptick in some areas. The impact of tariffs obviously is a major, In particular for us, it's the impact on our trading partners, with 70% of our exports actually going to China, and they have been by far hit the hardest. We still don't know what the impact directly of that will be. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Absolutely strengthening international relationships now is key for New Zealand. Strengthening those relationships with other trade partners such as the EU, etc. So the interest rate outlook is an interesting one. Initially we were worried about higher interest rates, now we're thinking actually they'll go down because of the slowing of economic growth globally and in New Zealand as well. We have some strengths here around food production. Food, everyone always needs food. We have some good markets here in terms of EU and Asia, so that is a strength. International education, another one, comparatively, we may actually look like a good option relative to some of the others. Defence Force consolidation, as we've heard in the last day, with an extra $9 billion of spending coming into that part with our large defence sector and our logistics capability. So I will skip through quite quickly. So this is the graph looking at our GDP growth. As you see, the growth in Palms North has been below the national since about 2022, but it's actually skipped up again here. And that largely is to do with that rural economy and the strength of that economy and the spending that that has stimulated across the economy. High commodity prices, very much supportive of that, even dairy prices. This is a New Zealand dollar index, so this is up a third over the year, so very strong. Beef prices, etc., very strong as well. One piece of good news around the tariffs is that lumber has not had a tariff placed on it by the US because they have major supply shortages there, so that's an area where we could see some additional activity. This is the reason why households still aren't spending. It's been really tough. We've had really strong growth in prices over that period of time, and households, businesses are still reluctant to spend because of that. As you can see there for the construction index, that's affected councils as well in terms of our cost increases. So this is the interest rate path. The green line is the OCR, and that was in February at the last monetary policy statement. So we're seeing those interest rates due to come down quite strongly this year. The top two are the 1 year and 2 year retail rates, interest rates. So we see that we will expect those to come down as that OCR does fall, and that will help to boost some confidence in the New Zealand economy. So we know what the data was for last year. Basically, these wider conditions are weighing on spending. The only bright spot that we had here, there was that commercial vehicle registrations went up 9%, and that was very strong relative to the national average. Again, a lot of that would have been driven by our very strong rural sector. Business investment and jobs data, again, reflect the challenges with falling employment in the city. Unemployment is stable, but a lot of that is due to some people leaving the labour force. So all the indicators here are exactly what we would expect to see at the tail end of a recession. House prices are stable and growth in household volumes is increasing strongly. So that is showing some activity there, which is promising. So assessing the impacts of tariffs on the New Zealand economy, the initial cost of uncertainty, of course, we've been watching in our markets over the last week. There's been absolute turmoil in the markets, and we're seeing that continue. In terms of New Zealand, the things that we're watching, our currency has gone down over 3%. It was 0.5511 USD, I will say, at 11:54 AM this morning. It has now gone up to about 55.33. So it's bouncing around all over the place, but there's a huge amount of volatility there, and that's really the point at the moment. So the lower New Zealand dollar does act as a bit of a buffer because we get more dollars for the goods that we export to other parts of the world, but also can raise costs for the things that we import. At the moment, oil is very weak. It's down another 4% today, down to about $56 a barrel for US crude. So that will buffer some of that impact on our economy. Commodity prices, really unclear. As we know, they're really strong at the moment. Oil prices coming down, which is positive for the things that we import, but we don't know what the impact is going to be yet on the goods that we export to other parts of the world. So confidence is a big thing. We're seeing it in our markets being undermined across the board. The US futures, the early market data is quite negative, so we expect when that market opens again for that to fall. And that's basically because today, the US administration did confirm the additional 50% tariff on China. So moving on to China, our biggest trading partner by far, now have a 104% tariff. If you add the 12.8% additional impact of removing the, they waive tariff cost for packages of under 800, that takes it up to about 116.8%. So that's major for the New Zealand economy. So in terms of costs and interest rate implications, those price pressures on countries paying increased tariffs will be highly inflationary. For us, we're probably looking at a lower inflationary environment and lower growth, and therefore lower interest rates. That's what we're picking currently will be the impact of all of this. Of course, with lower growth, that's not a good thing. So we're expecting to see the economy go through some tough times. Again, so much uncertainty, they could just as well be pulled back in the next couple of days. And although there would be an impact from the uncertainty, we simply don't know. So it's a watch and wait space at the moment. So these are the tariffs on our trading partners. As we can see there, Asia has been hit quite hard. These are our top 10 partners, so there has been some quite substantial impacts. Vietnam's at 46% and they're our 17th biggest partner, and also a very strong growth in that sector. So this is going to impact on our trading partners, and that will indirectly impact on us or demand goods. So economic outlook, I've put some positive things here because I actually think for our economy there is some things to be positive about. Again, we produce food for the world, quality education here, of which New Zealand has a very good reputation for internationally, and we may benefit from that. The defence sector investment, not to say that rearmament is a good thing globally, but we do have a strong defence sector here, and there will be investment flowing into the region for that. Logistics again, which is enabling and also supporting critical government services. We are relatively stable as an option for investment internationally, and that may benefit New Zealand. It will be interesting to see what happens there. As I've already mentioned, international cooperation key. The word is really that the government and monetary policy will need to do more to support the New Zealand economy through this. So I hope I managed that in time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Stacey. We've got first off the Mayor.
I was just going to move the recommendation and get us started.
Great. I've just got Councillor Naylor who's got a question. So I'll just go to Councillor Naylor and then we'll move that recommendation. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I was particularly interested in the section on spending, and on page 312, I was in the 3.23, in that bullet point, it talks about the discretionary items that are, you know, a decrease of 13.9% and 16.5%. And then in 3.25 also talks about reduction in domestic tourism. Which section would be relevant when we're looking at flights?
Definitely domestic tourism. Oh, yeah, definitely the tourism data, yeah.
So if people are travelling for reasons that aren't tourism, would that be in the discretionary items section, or is it just flow through different areas?
I think it's arts, recreation and transport that covers that within, so yeah, I'll have to actually look into that. It would be reflected in part in both, because we have the tourism electronic card spending data, and then we have the spending data, which also, the market view data, which also looks at spending from different parts of the country. So there would be an element of that in both.
So if that is, I mean, we, in light of the airport reports that we've had today, where they've seen a reduction in of 3% already, what would we expect based on this going forward?
So that would be in the arts, recreation and transport, I believe the sector is, and that would, and that is one of the sectors that is under pressure at the moment with domestic tourism being under pressure.
If that's down 16.5%, would we expect that might continue to reduce, or?
That's very much being driven by the risk aversion of New Zealand households at the moment to spend. If confidence builds from lower interest rates, then we may see that start to pick up. Things are so uncertain at the moment, it's very hard to judge what the impact will be on domestic tourism.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stacey. Just a real quick one about the rental properties. And you've got in there that there's 141 fewer properties rented from January to January. I was just wondering, is that fewer properties that are with tenancies, or is that fewer properties available to rent?
That is fewer properties with tenancies. So we monitor the bonds that have been lodged with MB and the tenancy services, so that is based on that. It's quite an interesting phenomenon at the moment, because we're seeing it in other parts of the country as well, that there appears to be an increase in stock available of rental properties. But I'm going to keep looking at that data because I'm interested to understand why that is.
Yeah, I think you had noted in there that could have been because the academic year wasn't yet underway. I just wondered, had there been any update on
Yeah, no,
now
not
that it is
yet,
underway?
but I am watching, so I will report back on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacey. That's all the questions. So we've got the Mayor that's moved the recommendations on page 303, and I'll second that. Do you want to comment? Okay. Okay, you do want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stacey. The reason I'm moving quickly, I'm just worried about a quorum around the room with people leaving. And I know some people need to leave by 5, but thank you for the work that you do. It's not that we're rushing you through because we don't like the work, but it actually, it's very valuable work and it does inform our decision making on other things, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I find this report really valuable, and I think it should help inform our decision making on things, and in particular that seeing the 16.5% decrease in recreation and visitor transport, and the connection that has to people choosing whether or not they can buy a flight, should actually give us information that should help inform our thinking when there are assumptions by the airport that there's going to be a certain growth in the future. So I think this is where, that's just an example where I think this is really valuable.
Thank you. I also agree the report's amazing, but I also think your ability to help our agencies is really good. So in terms of what you can offer CEDA and offer the airport, that's what we need, is that so that we can actually share what you can do. So now we'll look to vote, everyone. Thank you. We all voted? Is that everybody? Okay, that's 11 votes for, none against. We'll go to Gabrielle, which is the International Report, item number 17, on page 333. And Kate as well. Thank you. Handing over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Councillors, appreciate that it has been a very long day, so I'll be extremely brief. We will take the report as read. However, there's a couple of additions. So since the submission of the report, as Stacey has already alerted you to, there has been several global developments unfolded, particularly involving the United States. And as noted in the report from Stacey previously, the US has now imposed tariffs on over 50 countries, expanding well beyond the original focus on China, Canada, and Mexico. In addition, House Republicans have introduced a bill to halt the issuance of student visas to Chinese nationals, citing national security concerns. Now, if passed, then this would result in a total ban affecting approximately 300,000 Chinese students annually. And these are students who would be seeking alternative study destinations. That opens up an opportunity for New Zealand and, of course, Palmerston North. Last but not least, we have recognized the times of heightened geopolitical uncertainty at the moment, and international relations are not just important, they are essential. And dialogue is the antidote to fragmentation, mistrust, and rapid shifts in global priorities. So it is time now for us as a city, a global city, to invest in diplomatic reserve and international friendships. That's all. Unless Kate's got anything to add, we are happy to answer any questions.
I would just like to add quickly to the international education section of this report. We have made significant efforts to present comprehensive quantitative data for you. So this includes total enrolments of international students across the various subsectors at the national and regional level, comparing pre and post-COVID figures. We've provided international student visa data at the regional level, and we've been able to provide higher education international student headcount and equivalent full-time status data at the city level. We have also provided quantitative data on the economic impact of international students in the broader international education sector and their contribution to both national and regional economies. These figures were based on reports and analyses from Education New Zealand and Infometrics for the 2015-16 period. Following discussions with Stacey Andrews, our city economist, it has been suggested that similar economic modelling could be replicated to generate comparable data and insights for 2025 and beyond, utilising things like treasury indicators, etc. So we'll aim to include these economic value metrics in our future 6-monthly updates. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Open it up for questions. There isn't any. Thank you very much. I'd like to move the report, seconded by Councillor Wood. Just want to first off say, adding the visa data has been brilliant, and it's really added a substance to your report, so thank you very much for doing that. I'll go to the Deputy Mayor to start with.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I moved very quickly. I didn't want the Mayor to be saying what I was going to be saying. But I do want to thank Gabriel and Kate. I think that well done. And also Stacey for your input. You coming before this report just sort of reinforced the things that I had been thinking after having read it. I think that this report sheds light on the critical role advocacy through the Mayor's Office and Council plays in fostering meaningful connections with our international partners. It emphasises the undeniable benefits of long-term and ongoing commitment to building and maintaining these relationships. In today's interconnected world, these partnerships are not just about exchange, they are pivotal to positioning our city as an attractive destination for inward investment. I wrote quite a bit in here, but I'm going to just jump this and shortcut it, but just saying I think we are poised really well to pick up on education, on business, of all those relationships. And when I read this report, I thought it's very extensive, and I thank you because people around the council had been asking for this information, and I was really thrilled to read it. And I know all the hard work behind the scenes that you do, so thank you very much. Kia ora.
The Mayor.
Look, I'll be very quick. Thank you, Madam Chair, and like the Deputy Mayor. Thank you to Gabrielle and Kate. Look, I think councillors, the report's excellent. Councillors have actually been asking for this for quite a while, so I think it's great that there's quite a lot of substance to it. And look, international relations is a longer game. And look, that if I could just quote something, the sum of small parts, or in this case, sort of minimal investment, does add up to a bigger prize. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Having an international relations unit with obviously programs and connections both locally, nationally and globally does give you some runs on the board. I look at the international education and the ramp up that we've made, and I can feel it in our schools, I can feel it in our institutions, and we're slowly getting the university back in that space as well. We're really starting to get some international people here. And when I just hear about the China situation, there's some real opportunities for us as a city. Research, engineering and healthcare, and just that welcoming community sort of example, that is a way where having an international outlook and a very diverse population actually does help some of our sectors. I think about engineering. Even our own council has benefited from that, with being able to recruit internationally engineering people. Research and healthcare, you just need to go to the hospital or out to our research institutes. They're just basically the United Nations. And I think that's really cool, really cool. And then in trade, again, this is the longer game, but I can just tell you we're on the cusp of a big pharmaceuticals project which really fits with us very, very well. And although it's confidential at the moment, there's a bit of work going on behind the scenes, and it will be a big game changer for us if it gets over the line. So there is stuff happening, and thank the officers.
Thank you. We'll now go to vote. Great, that's passed 10 votes for, none against. We'll just quickly look at the work schedule on page 369. Ask the General Manager if there's anything in it you want to share.
No comment.
No comment, that's the best line of the day, no comment. Wish I could have used that one. Okay, Councillor Johnson, you want to say something in the work schedule?
So I've just got a quick question. I see Vogel Street safety improvements is not progressing. So is that going to then come off the work schedule completely?
Glenn's nodding behind you.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if that's the case, how can we sort of retain sort of track of these projects that didn't get funded by NZTA so that we can look at them again during, you know, a long-term plan or a budget round? Because I fear they'll be wiped off and then we'll kind of lose sight of them altogether.
Through the chair, officers will keep a list of them and will refresh them if and when the funding environment changes.
Okay, thank you, that would be a help.
Thank you. So I'd like to move that the Economic Growth Committee receive the work schedule dated today, seconded by Councillor Wood. Just vote on that. And I'm handing over to Councillor Fitzgerald. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. I guess in this time of the year of ills, chills, flus and let's all take care of ourselves, those around us and those closest to us. Ka puta ki whai au, ki te ao marama, whakamoa ki a tīna, haumi e hui e, tāki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora whānau. We are going to postpone the workshop to another time. I think the word fatigue had been thrown around earlier on. I think kanui. I think we've had enough for the moment, but we will reschedule that. Thank you, everyone. Kia ora.